Mastering the Lightning of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101: The Return of Hagrid. Hagrid hadn't come back since last night. Anduin, who was alone, stood in front of the cabin, staring blankly at the forbidden forest in the distance. For some reason, Anduin felt a nameless anger boiling in his chest. With this nameless anger, he didn't know how to vent it, and the magic power on his body surged uncontrollably. All the objects around him floated in the air uncontrollably, and giant pumpkins, barrels, and the like, all surrounded him with Anduin's confused thoughts. Suddenly, as if some shackles were untied, the magic power around Anduin added another change, and the objects floating in the air seemed to be held tightly in the air by invisible big hands. Ah! Anduin roared, venting his anger, and the objects floating in the air, as if being held tightly, were all crushed into pieces as if being squeezed by a huge force. As everything around him was crushed into pieces, the sky seemed to feel Anduin's inner pain, and a light rain fell. After feeling the coldness of the raindrops, Anduin seemed to wake up, and then he found that there was no good thing within a 10-meter radius of him. The big wood for holding water, a wooden fence, and the fruits and vegetables in the vegetable garden were all crushed. At this time, Anduin subconsciously stretched out his right hand, and a transparent big hand appeared in the rain in the void a few meters in front of him. He stretched out his hand to grasp and wave it, and the transparent big hand in front of him also responded with Anduin's movements. Is this my barrier spell? Anduin also reflected at this time. Due to his drastic fluctuations in emotions, the barrier spell that had already reached the instinct level also broke through. Now it has become a real magician's hand. Anduin looked at the barrier spell that had broken through to the extraordinary level. Perhaps it can no longer be simply called a barrier spell, but at this time he was completely unhappy and just stood in the rain. Anduin, who was gradually calming down, could still hear the faint laughter coming from the direction of Hogwarts Castle, accompanied by the fireworks and people riding brooms excitedly in the air to celebrate. He lowered his head and silently cleaned up the mess he had made. The peaceful and cheerful Hogwarts formed a sharp contrast with the lonely Anduin. After a night that made it difficult for everyone to calm down, in the early morning, Anduin heard the rumbling sound of an engine. Hearing the sound, Anduin quickly put on his clothes and went outside the hut, just in time to see Hagrid riding a motorcycle and landing in front of the hut. Hagrid, where have you been these 2 days? This is Cyrus's motorcycle. Why is it here? Although there was no cargo box next to the motorcycle, Anduin recognized it at the time. This motorcycle was Cyrus's. Hagrid took off his goggles, got out of the car, looked at Anduin with a gloomy expression, sniffed and said, I don't know if you heard about it, James and Lily. Yeah. Anduin also looked depressed, but raised his head again. What's the matter with your car? I heard from Professor Bones that Cyrus betrayed Lily and the others. How did his car end up here? That story started the night before yesterday. Hagrid pulled Anduin back into the cabin, picked up the copper cup and took a big sip of water. That night I received a notice from Dumbledore. He asked me to go to Godric's Hollow and find James and Lily's child, Harry. That means they did that when I was doing the spell experiment that day. Anduin was stunned. That's right. Hagrid sighed. When I got there, I saw the bodies of James and Lily in the house. James fell in the front hall, and Lily was lying alone next to little Harry. When Hagrid mentioned this, his tears couldn't stop flowing out again. He had to take out his handkerchief and blow his nose desperately, and said in a slightly choked voice, the poor Potter couple was lying there alone, but Dumbledore ordered me to protect Harry and send him back to Little Whinging District safely. After blowing his nose hard again, Hagrid continued, but when I came out of the Potter's house, I happened to meet Sirius Black. Damn it, I almost believed him at the time. He told me to hand Harry over to him, but I didn't agree. You met Sirius Black? Anduin was a little surprised, still thinking about taking Potter away. Where is the motorcycle? He knew I was here on Dumbledore's orders, so he gave me his motorcycle, and then I left. It took me a whole day to get to the agreed place, and then Dumbledore put Harry at the door of his relatives. Poor Harry. Hagrid couldn't help it again, like a sad little girl, tears couldn't stop flowing. After listening to Hagrid's story, Anduin felt heavy-hearted and had some different guesses about the situation that night. Why did Cyrus go to the Potter family after Voldemort attacked the Potter family? If he really rebelled, why didn't he attack Hagrid, but let Hagrid leave safely and gave Hagrid his beloved motorcycle? Hagrid, is Principal Dumbledore back? Anduin felt that he had no clue, and now he just wanted to ask Dumbledore in person. He should be back. I wrote back and it took me a whole night. In theory, he should be faster than me. Hagrid said with a sob. Okay, Hagrid, you take a rest first. I have something to do with Headmaster Dumbledore. After Anduin comforted Hagrid for a while, he got up, changed his clothes, and walked towards the castle. At this time, in Dumbledore's office, another person was questioning Dumbledore. You promised to keep her safe. Snape shouted hysterically to Dumbledore. Lily and James trusted someone they shouldn't have, Severus. Dumbledore's face was heavy at this time, just like you, but the child is still alive. He doesn't need protection, the Dark Lord is gone. Snape shouted decadently. The Dark Lord will come back, and the child will be in danger. Dumbledore stared at the frustrated Snape and added, his eyes are very much like his mother's, if you really love her. Dumbledore's words made Snape's heart twitch, and he looked up at Dumbledore and said, don't let anyone know. Come to Hogwarts and help me, Snape, I will help you resolve the Ministry of Magic's accusations. Dumbledore said. Snape nodded silently, raised his head and took a deep breath, gently wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and walked towards the office door. After walking down the spiral staircase, Snape had returned to an indifferent expression. Chapter 102 Misunderstanding. Snape still couldn't calm down the complicated emotions in his heart. He numbly walked out along the corridor step by step. However, just as he was approaching the stairs of the 8th floor, a person came up from downstairs. Snape looked up instinctively and saw a boy wearing a Slytherin uniform, with long black hair and a monocle on his right eye. He had a handsome face, a pair of sword-like eyebrows, and black eyes staring at him. What kind of new look was this? And the boy in front of him looked a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere. The young wizard in front of him was also stunned for a moment after seeing his face clearly, and then he quickly took out his wand and raised his hand to cast a fast and fierce barrier spell. Although Snape felt puzzled at the moment, he reacted quickly. The wand appeared in his hand before he raised his hand and deflected the spell. But the boy's attack was continuous. Obstacle spells, petrification spells, disarming spells, and stunning spells were all fired at him like machine guns. At this time, Snape was attacked by the little wizard who appeared out of nowhere, and his heart was also beaten. While constantly using the armor spell to resist, he also shot several evil spells to attack. But the boy in front of him was very skilled. He used his agile steps to dodge the attack in a flash. The evil spells that were difficult to dodge were also bounced off by the barrier spell that was condensed into a shield. For a while, the spells at both sides flew across, and the rebounded or missed spells fell on the wall and the ground, making a loud noise. The stone wall and the ground were also blasted into pieces of rubble. At this time, Snape did not expect that the little wizard in front of him was so difficult to deal with. He could not help but slightly increase the power of the spells. After breaking the opponent's spells, several spells still hit the boy with undiminished momentum. The young man in front of him also showed strong control. He kept waving his wand, rolling up that gravel on the ground. The rapidly flowing air also rolled up a magic storm in front of him, which deviated the trajectory of the powerful spells. Some spells even circled around the little wizard and then counterattacked him. At this time, the young man took advantage of the gap to accumulate power and swung his left fist at Snape. Snape felt a huge pressure the moment the little wizard made a move. His perception told him that there was a giant fist condensed by magic in the air in front of him attacking him. In a hurry, he mobilized all his magic power and swung it down with all his strength. A crescent-shaped sharp magic spell split the giant fist in front of him, but it also triggered a violent magic explosion. The air wave instantly overturned Snape and the little wizard. After falling to the ground, Snape felt pain all over his body, but he still struggled to stand up. However, he found that the little wizard opposite him reacted faster. After falling to the ground, he immediately touched the ground with his back, then exerted force instantly, and did a card jump, using a posture that Snape had never seen before, and then shot a spell at him cruelly. At this time, Snape was struggling to stand up. The spell that was shot directly at him did not give him any time to react. Seeing that the spell was about to reach him, he was angry and secretly said that he was unlucky. What the hell was going on? He had a fight with a student for no reason, and it seemed that he was going to capsize in the ditch. However, just when he was about to be knocked unconscious by the attacking spell, someone stood in front of him and blocked the spell for him. It was Dumbledore. Dumbledore was in the office. Suddenly, he heard bursts of explosions coming from downstairs, so he hurried to check. As a result, he saw such a scene as soon as he arrived. If he had come a step later, Snape would have been in trouble. Anduin, what are you doing? Dumbledore blocked the spell for Snape, glanced at Snape, and then stared at Anduin and asked. At this time, Anduin was standing opposite Snape and Dumbledore. He originally came to find Dumbledore, but when he went up to the 8th floor, he happened to find a person walking in the corridor. After careful identification, Anduin found that this was Snape, whom he had seen in Sirius's photo album. Suddenly encountering a Death Eater, Anduin was in a bad mood, so he naturally raised his hand and did it. After Anduin experienced a battle and hit a barrier punch with all his strength, he was exhausted at this time, but he still pointed his wand at Snape and shouted angrily, "Principal, I know this person, this is a Death Eater." When Snape heard Anduin's words, his face suddenly became gloomy, and he climbed up and snorted coldly. "It seems that there was a little misunderstanding between you just now." Dumbledore looked at the corridor that was almost broken and smiled slightly. "Misunderstanding? Headmaster, I don't understand what you mean." Anduin still didn't put down his wand, and the tip of his wand was pointed at Snape. "Don't get excited, Anduin, Severus is one of us, I can vouch for him." Dumbledore saw that Anduin was still staring at Snape, and hurriedly advised, "Are you sure?" Anduin heard Dumbledore say this, but based on his trust in the headmaster, he slowly put away his wand and walked forward with a frown. "We have all been through a lot in the past 2 days, and it seems that you have too, Anduin." Dumbledore could see that Anduin was not in a good state, and turned to look at Snape. "I'm sorry, Severus, for making you go through all this as soon as you returned to school. It seems that Hogwarts doesn't welcome me very much. Maybe I should reconsider what you said," Snape said with a stern face and a cold voice. "This is also that charming part of Hogwarts. You will always find surprises here, and you will like this place again." Dumbledore ignored Snape's angry words. "Anduin, this is just a misunderstanding. Professor Snape is not the person you think." "Professor?" Anduin seemed to hear a special name, but at this time he still looked at Snape with a slightly questioning look, and then said to Dumbledore, "Okay, Headmaster, I was reckless about what happened just now. If you mean by surprise, you were attacked." Snape glanced at Dumbledore, and then stared at Anduin fiercely. "I will remember you, reckless boy." With another cold snort, Snape passed by and left here. "It seems that you're very angry today, Anduin." Dumbledore pointed to the corridors around him that looked like ruins. "Sorry, Headmaster, it's all my fault." Anduin frowned and looked at Snape who was leaving, then turned to apologize to Dumbledore. Dumbledore shook his head slightly. Anduin was not the emotional man in the past 2 days. After thinking about it, he took out his wand and waved it lightly. All the fragments of the corridor that was blown up into the air and fit back to their original positions without any gaps. Everything around him returned to its original state. Chapter 103 Doubts. Let's go. "If I guess correctly, you originally came to see me," Dumbledore said slowly. "Yes, Professor, there are many troubling questions that I can't get answers to, so," Anduin sighed. Dumbledore led Anduin back to the principal's office, looked at the depressed Anduin, and spoke first. "I didn't expect this to happen. All this is due to my negligence. If you have any questions now, just ask." Anduin pondered for a moment and looked up at Dumbledore. "How is Sirius now? What is the result of your interrogation of him?" Sure enough, Dumbledore saw Anduin running to him early in the morning, and he also expected that he would ask this question. "What I can say is that Sirius did not refute his behavior after being arrested, and has now been taken to Azkaban." But this doesn't make sense. Has Sirius been pretending all along?" Anduin was still puzzled. "Yes, this world is full of unreasonable things. Often, reality is more magical than the stories in books. No one knows what made Sirius become like this. We believed in someone we shouldn't have believed in. Although it is painful, it is also that fact. I'm sorry, Anduin, for telling you such a cold fact." Dumbledore also sighed at this time. "Since even you are so sure, it is really the fact." Although Anduin couldn't believe it, he could only accept it now. "Can I go see him? I want to hear him say it himself." Anduin thought about it again and tried to say it. "I'm sorry, he is now in the safest and most dangerous place in the wizarding world. Not everyone can go there." Dumbledore glanced at Anduin and felt that he couldn't be so ruthless. The only people who can go to Azkaban are the station Aurors, senior officials of the Ministry of Magic, members of the Wizengamot, and some prestigious people. Maybe if you try hard, you may have the opportunity to ask him the answer in person in the future. Anduin knew that this was Dumbledore's disguised enlightenment and encouragement to himself, so he nodded and said, "I understand, Headmaster. We must always look forward." After a little consideration, Dumbledore said, "You are also a good friend of the Potters. I think you also hope to attend their funeral and see them off in person." Funeral? We have attended enough funerals this year. Anduin couldn't help but think back to the things that happened during the summer vacation. Suddenly he remembered something and asked, "By the way, where is Harry? Is he safe now?" "Don't worry, we have arranged him in an absolutely safe place." Lily cast a powerful protective magic for Harry before she died, which also allowed him to survive the attack of the Dark Lord. I strengthened that power, and now no one can find him. In Dumbledore's eyes, Anduin was a child with a strong will and a sense of justice. His behavior during the summer vacation was worthy of Dumbledore's trust, so he revealed some things to him. Then, what about Snape, the professor? Anduin remembered that the last time he saw Snape was before entering Hogwarts, and Anduin was almost hit by his god of war. As for him, you only need to know that he hates the Dark Lord as much as we do. In fact, it has always been thanks to Severus who provided us with information. Now that the Dark Lord has fallen, his identity has been truly made public. Dumbledore said what he could say. "Oh? So you are so sure about the attack during last Christmas holiday because, right, so I said Snape is trustworthy. You'll have to spend a long time with him in the future, so try to maintain a good relationship with him." Anduin didn't understand what the headmaster meant by spending a long time with him, but what he thought of was the information about Snape. So it was like this: when the Potter family was attacked last time, Headmaster Dumbledore said that he got the news from other channels. Was it him? Anduin did suspect that Dumbledore had an insider among the Death Eaters. Anduin solved a lot of doubts, and then nodded with relief. "I understand, Headmaster. I'm sorry to have caused you so much trouble." Dumbledore shook his head and said, "I don't think anyone would blame a kind-hearted child like you. I'll ask Hagrid to inform you before the funeral. And don't forget to attend the dinner tonight. I know you haven't had dinner in the hall for a while. There are important things to announce tonight." Anduin walked out of the headmaster's office, digesting the large amount of information he had gained in the past 2 days. Although he had a premonition that Lily's family would not be absolutely safe because of Dumbledore's protection, he actually still had a glimmer of luck in his heart, and Cyrus' betrayal shocked him even more. He didn't understand what changed Cyrus's position, or whether he really changed his position. He took out a magic photo from his arms. It was taken at the Potter's house last Christmas. Looking at the two happy families and Cyrus with a proud face, Anduin couldn't help frowning again. Can Dumbledore's words really be fully trusted? Did Cyrus really betray his beliefs? This may be related to what happened in the past 6 months when he disappeared, so let me find out what happened. Maybe Anduin wanted to give himself an explanation, or maybe he wanted to find a goal for himself, he said to himself. Although he was skeptical about all the things and words that happened, he did not show it. He would bury these doubts in his heart and then find the answers himself. With a mood of suspicion and speculation, Anduin went straight to class. Anduin was absent-minded in the class that day, but the professors did not criticize him, because other little wizards were more naughty. After learning that the Dark Lord had fallen and disappeared, almost all the little wizards entered the carnival mode. The classroom was full of noise, and the professors were in a good mood, so they let these excited children go. In the evening, Anduin followed Dumbledore's advice and attended the dinner that night, and then he heard the shocking news. What? That Snape will take over from Professor Slughorn as the new potions professor. And he will also be the head of Slytherin House? Anduin was instantly spartan after hearing the news announced by Dumbledore. In other words, he had just had a fight with his new head of house, the potions professor, in the morning, and almost overturned his car. Chapter 104 Professor Snape. At this time, Professor Slughorn was giving a farewell speech on the podium in the auditorium. It can be seen that he was quite happy with this arrangement. He was about to retire and said goodbye to all the students with a smile. The young wizards present also gave the professor affirmative and warm applause. As far as teaching was concerned, Professor Slughorn was still very popular. After all, he was a good man. Apart from being a little vain, he always treated people with the attitude of a kind elder. At this time, Snape, who was sitting in the teacher's seat, kept squinting at Anduin. He was almost showing his hair, so he could only bow his head and secretly say that he was unlucky. It seemed that he would suffer in the future. "Hey, Anduin, do you know the new dean? He seems to like you very much." He keeps staring at you. Vivian stretched her head to look at Snape and said to Anduin. Hilly. Anduin glanced at Snape again and found that he was still staring at him intently. I would rather not be so liked. Where have you been these 2 days? You don't know how lively it is these 2 days. All the students are partying, and even the meals are much more abundant. Vivian said happily. I'm not in such a good mood. By the way, how were those pure blood guys doing recently? Anduin was a little curious about those guys. Without the leader, what tricks can they come up with? What else can they do? Vivian turned her head and glanced in the direction of the seniors. Those guys were still dejected at first, but yesterday that Rowley actually jumped out and announced that the Dark Lord was not dead, and said that he would continue to defend the dignity of the pure blood family. In a sense, he is right. Although Anduin didn't know the plot of the original book, he could also guess that Voldemort would not be so easy to play. I ended up having another big fight with Vanessa, but things have been quieter recently. Why don't you go back to the common room? Wouldn't it be boring to stay outside all day? And you don't know anything about the school. Vivian said. Vivian knew that many Slytherin purebloods were against Anduin, and often talked about him behind his back with dirty words, and always wanted to make trouble for him, but Anduin didn't give them any chances and left the common room early. Those people didn't see Anduin once a day, but the situation seemed to have changed recently. Let's observe it. Some people don't do evil for any reason, but just for the sake of doing evil, and they always find some excuses for their behavior. Anduin said without comment. The dinner ended in peace and joy, at least for most people. Anduin's mood was not so beautiful the next day, because the first class this morning was the potions class taught by the new Dean Snape. At this time, Anduin and Vivian were sitting in front of the operating table, quietly waiting for the class. Soon, a black figure appeared in front of them. He was wearing a black robe, long black hair, and black eyes. Snape had a stern face, like a silent bat, flashing in front of everyone, holding his hands in front of his chest, coldly scanning the people below the stage, and then focusing his eyes on Anduin. I don't know how you learned in the previous potion classes, and I don't want to know. Although Professor Slughorn has rich knowledge of potions and teaching experience, he is always too kind and always tolerates some stupid guys to make the same mistakes over and over again. Snape looked around with a cold face, and then spoke word by word. Making potions is a profound science, a sophisticated craft. For those few who are truly interested, I can teach you how to confuse your mind and confuse your senses. I will teach you how to infame, brew glory, and even let you escape death. By the way. Snape glanced at Anduin again. Perhaps some people think they have extraordinary abilities and are confident enough in themselves. Mr. Wilson. Snape walked in front of Anduin. Here he comes, and Anduin is helpless, but he has to bite the bullet and stand up. Professor. What will I get if I add narcissus root powder to wormwood infusion? Snape asked coldly. You'll get a powerful sleeping potion, the living hell decoction, also known as the water of life and death. Snape's face remained calm, and he said, If I want to make a pot of joy potion, how should I deal with the main ingredients? A pot of joy potion requires 2 mandrake fruits, one whole and not peeled, and the other peeled and cut into strips. Anduin answered calmly. So if I have a portion of contaminated dragon blood, what kind of potion do you think I can make? Anduin frowned. This question was seriously beyond the scope, but he still answered with a stiff upper lip. As far as I know, contaminated dragon blood can be used as the main ingredient of dragon madness blood, but the potion may drive people crazy. Maybe you just need to answer the question directly, and there is no need to make such unnecessary reminders. Snape still stared at Anduin gloomily. It seems that some people do have the capital to be arrogant. Anduin did not respond to Snape's words, and sat down calmly. What are you waiting for? Why don't you write all this down? Snape returned to the podium, crossed his hands, and said loudly to the teacher. Snape's momentum instantly shocked everyone, and for a while there was a rustling sound of copying in the classroom. Oh my god, I thought Snape liked you before. What did you do to him? It feels like he wants to bite you to death. Vivian tilted her head and complained quietly. Anduin shook his head slightly. He couldn't stand being bullied by this professor all the time. He could only think about what to do. Should he admit defeat first? Sometimes he still had to put on a show. The potion class continued in this depressing atmosphere. Snape was instructing everyone to mix the swelling potion, which could cause swelling in the parts of the body that came into contact with the potion. Get the pufferfish eyes ready. Next, wait for me to stir the potion in the crucible 3 times, and then put them in one by one. Anduin calmly instructed Vivian. At this time, a figure silently swayed behind that 2 of them and commented contemptuously. Are you so sure that the time you put the materials in must be accurate, Mr. Wilson? Maybe you should confirm it again. Vivian was startled by the sudden voice behind her, and the materials held by the tweezers were almost scared off, but Anduin beside her replied calmly. Yes, Professor, I am sure it is now, Vivian. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 105 Whales. Vivian, who was standing by, habitually followed orders and added the materials to the crucible. Then she saw the slightly boiling potion calm down instantly, and the color changed from the strange dark blue to light green. HMPH. Seeing Anduin's firm mind, Snape didn't say anything more, but turned to the operating table next to him and said, "You 2 idiots, stop stirring endlessly. Do you want to turn yourself into a pig's head?" Vivian patted her chest and stuck out her tongue. She was almost fooled by Snape just now, and thought that their operation was wrong. As soon as Anduin entered the working state, he was like an emotionless machine, turning a deaf ear to the interference around him, and was the first to complete the production of the swelling potion, but this only earned Snape a mediocre evaluation. Finally, this torturous potion class ended, and all the students ran out of the classroom as if they were escaping, even the Slytherin students. But Anduin stayed where he was calmly. He felt that he had to talk to Snape, otherwise he would not be able to bear being targeted all the time in the future. Snape saw Anduin, who had not left the classroom, and laughed contemptuously. "Why, Mr. Wilson, why don't you leave? Are you going to attack me again?" Anduin listened to Snape's harsh sarcasm, calmed down, and said calmly, "Sorry, Professor Snape, I stayed here to apologize to you again for what happened yesterday. I was quite emotional yesterday, and I didn't know your true identity. I didn't mean to disrespect you." "Humph, you don't need to say these high-sounding words. I remember you. It was you who saved Cyrus' life at the time. As his friend, I don't find it strange to see me react like this. People who have been polluted by such idiots naturally have a dull mind," Snape still said sarcastically. Anduin narrowed his eyes slightly. Is this professor always so sarcastic in his words? Why did he turn the topic to Cyrus? Thinking of Cyrus, he couldn't help but feel irritated. Lily and I are good friends. Maybe more people have been infected by her. Are you going to blame Lily too? I don't know if you know her, Anduin retorted bluntly. When Snape heard this, he rushed to Anduin excitedly and said word by word, "Mr. Wilson, please be careful when you talk to the professor. Is it necessary to be so excited?" Anduin felt puzzled, but still said calmly, "I'm sorry, Professor, I don't know why you are so hostile to me. If it is because of my offense yesterday, I apologize to you, but if it is because of something else that you can't stand, then I can only express my regret." Arrogant boy, but I don't think you are hopeless. Let me remind you. Snape's expression gradually calmed down. I ask you, why didn't I see you when I was patrolling and speaking in the Slytherin common room yesterday? Maybe you have never regarded yourself as a part of Slytherin. It turned out that there was this reason why Snape said he was arrogant. Anduin had to explain. The reason why I don't live in the Slytherin common room is just for my own safety. You should know that I am a Muggle wizard. Don't make excuses. The Dark Lord has fallen now, and I remember that you're very good at fighting. Snape teased. As the Dean of Slytherin, I order you to move back to the Slytherin dormitory. I will go there to inspect today. I hope you won't let me down. I understand. Anduin frowned and had to bite the bullet and agreed. After coming out of the potions classroom, Anduin thought about how to deal with this bad-tempered dean in the future. As for moving back to the dormitory, he didn't care. Now he has accumulated a lot of trump cards and is not particularly afraid of those aggressive pure-blood wizards. After making a plan in his mind, Anduin did not delay and prepared to move back to the Slytherin dormitory now. After arriving at the common room, he found that there were some interesting changes here from before. There was a hand-washing mahjong table openly placed in the lobby of the lounge. At this time, several female students were playing mahjong with great interest, and there were many people watching around. Good guy, mahjong is considered to be carried forward in Slytherin. Many of the freshmen found it very strange to see a stranger coming in from outside, but Anduin was wearing the Slytherin uniform, which caused everyone to whisper and ask about this stranger. When the pure blood wizards such as Sample Travs saw Anduin suddenly appear, they couldn't help but show resentment. They were attacked in the main tower of Hogwarts before, and even a fool knew who did it. Travs was the most angry because his wallet had been stolen for 2 consecutive years, which was a great shame. They didn't dare to attack openly in the common room, but Travs couldn't stand it, so he walked up and sneered, "Hey, isn't this our famous Snake House ghost? You're willing to go back to Slytherin? Maybe the sorting hat made a mistake and shouldn't have sorted a disgusting guy like you into Slytherin." "I agree with some of your views," Anduin sneered. "Slytherin students are always smart and have a sense of honor, but there are always idiots like you who repeatedly lower the bottom line at the academy. You don't reflect on yourself and still have the nerve to spit shit here." "You?" Trav's face turned red with anger when he heard Anduin's sarcasm. Just when he was about to step forward to vent his anger, he was held back by Rosia and others next to him. He could only shout hysterically, "Let me go, I'm going to show this mudblood that he underestimated me." Everyone in the lounge was attracted by the movement here, and even the girls who were playing mahjong turned their heads to look at Anduin and Travs, but someone interrupted the two parties who were verbally conflicting. "Enough, Travs, stop embarrassing yourself here." A senior with short light brown hair pulled Travs aside and said. Anduin knew this guy. He was 4th grade at Quick Wilkes. He remembered that last Christmas, a guy named Wilkes seemed to have died in the battle with the Potters. He seemed to be this guy's uncle, and he was also a guy who believed in pure blood supremacy. However, after Quick Wilkes pulled Travs aside, he smiled at Anduin, showing an expression that he thought was very friendly, and said, "We're all Slytherins, there is no need to be so aggressive, right, Anduin?" Chapter 106. He misses his uncle. "Oh?" Anduin raised his monocle again. "You said it as if I was the one who started the trouble. Don't wrongly accuse a good person. Sample is the heir of the Travs family. I don't think anyone wants to provoke him." Wilkes looked at Anduin with great pride. "Sometimes, having one more friend is more valuable than having one more enemy. What do you think?" "Then what do you want?" Anduin raised his eyebrows and looked at Wilkes teasingly. "I know you. As an excellent student in the 2nd grade, you are favored by many professors. We are willing to extend an olive branch to you. As long as you are willing to support me, we can no longer pursue your muggle wizard identity. As for Travs..." Wilkes tilted his head and glanced at the furious Sample next to him. "I can make the decision and let him forgive your disrespect. I think this is a good thing that has the best of both worlds. You know how to choose." "What? Forgive this stinky mudblood? Why?" Before Anduin could speak, Travs next to him shouted at Wilkes angrily. "Okay, Sample, this is not the place for fooling around. You should learn to contribute to the glory of Slytherin and the pure blood family." Wilkes turned his head and glared at Travs, then looked at Anduin again. "You're a smart man, you know that people always strive for higher positions." Anduin looked at Wilkes's lame performance and couldn't help curling his lips. These guys are really good at putting labels on themselves, as if they represent Slytherin. They still don't pursue my muggle identity. "Forgive me? Should I bow my head and call you master?" Anduin approached Wilkes, sneered and said word by word, "Sorry, senior, I'm not used to wagging my tail and begging for mercy to guys who work as dogs for others. I think what you should do now is to keep your tail between your legs. After all, it is not easy for a dog without an owner. Be careful not to follow in your uncle's footsteps. You." Wilkes was so angry when he heard Anduin's half-sarcastic and half-threatening words. He stared at Anduin's eyes and didn't pretend to be a gentleman as before. At this time, Snape, who had just entered the Slytherin common room and was about to patrol, saw this scene. Snape frowned and said coldly like a ghost, "What are you doing?" The people who were gathering in a group saw the Dean coming and greeted Snape collectively. "Hello, Dean." "Anduin, answer me, what happened?" Snape saw Anduin surrounded by a group of guys and helped him out. At this time, Travs and Wilkes frowned and looked at each other, secretly complaining in their hearts. This guy would be scolded if he complained to the Dean. "Nothing, Dean." Anduin curled his lips and smiled slightly. "They haven't seen me in the lounge for a while. They are communicating with me. Wilkes also told me that he missed his uncle and wanted to go to him to play." "Uncle?" Snape glanced at Wilkes. He remembered that his uncle just died last year. This guy is so mean. But Snape didn't think too much. He looked at Wilkes and asked, "Is that so, Wilkes?" Wilkes cursed Anduin for being vicious in his heart, saying that he wanted to see his uncle was the same as wanting him to die, but he still answered honestly, "Well, it's like this. We're communicating." Seeing this, Snape narrowed his eyes slightly, glanced at Anduin again, and said, "Come out with me." "Yes, Dean." Anduin glanced at the people who were still there, and followed Professor Snape out of the lounge. Snape led Anduin to his office in the basement, turned his head and stared at Anduin, mocking him. "Humph, you are really amazing. You are not afraid of power. You defeat the strong with the weak. Do you think you are very capable? Can provoking those guys satisfy your vanity? Or do you think all this is interesting? Power?" Anduin laughed mockingly. "I don't think those guys represent any power, and you can see that I didn't take the initiative to provoke them. You can't expect me to shrink my head underground when someone points at my nose. And," Anduin emphasized again, "it was you who asked me to return to Slytherin. I was living well outside and would not cause such trouble. So you mean that this is all my fault?" Snape asked with a stern face. "I don't mean that, and I don't mean to blame you. I also think it's a good thing to return to the big family of Slytherin at this time. After all, I also want to understand what power is." Anduin smiled. "As the head of Slytherin, I have the obligation to warn you not to cause trouble for me in the academy." Snape narrowed his eyes and said, "If I understand you correctly, if I am causing trouble passively, then there is no problem." Anduin raised his eyebrows and asked, "Slippery tongue?" Snape listened to Anduin's words, but did not refute him. Instead, he asked another thing. "I remember I saw you before, in Nocturne Alley last summer." "Yes, you almost killed me." Anduin was furious when he heard Snape mention this. "You were not dead." Snape was in a hurry at the time, but he didn't care so much. "At the time, you had a defensive amulet on you to protect you. It doesn't look like your own thing." "You mean that one?" Anduin turned out a pendant from his collar. Before going to school, he made a necklace with the silver chain given by Augusta and Lily's amulet and wore it every day. Snape's emotions fluctuated when he saw the amulet. He walked up to Anduin, picked up the amulet and looked at it carefully. Anduin was startled when he saw Snape suddenly get so close. This guy must be a pervert. If he used his greasy long hair to hit me in the face, I would die on the spot, Anduin thought tangled. "This is a gift from Lily. If you're interested, make one yourself," Anduin reminded. "I don't have the habit of stealing other people's things," Snape said coldly, then stared at the amulet for a while and gently put it down. Anduin thought that this Snape was a bit inexplicable, but when he saw that he had no intention of stealing things, he didn't say anything. "You don't look like you are doing well in Slytherin." Snape didn't know why, but he was uncharacteristically concerned about Anduin. Chapter 107. Invulnerable Hammer. "As for this, Dean, you don't have to worry too much. I will take good care of myself." Anduin was a little confused by Snape's inexplicable kindness, and now he just wanted to go back to do his own things. "Okay, you can go back now. I will warn Wilkes, remember not to cause trouble for me." Snape turned around and said with his back to Anduin, "I don't think those guys will listen to your warning honestly." Anduin didn't say anything in his heart, but he nodded to Snape and left the office. At this time, Snape, who was facing away from Anduin, had 2 lines of tears silently spreading in his eyes, and muttered the name Lily. After Anduin was inexplicably called out by Snape to chat, he didn't understand what Snape meant, but now he has a lot of things to do. Since then, Anduin has moved back to the Slytherin dormitory. Although he was coldly criticized by the Pure Blood faction every day, under Snape's warning, they did not choose to fight in the common room. But Anduin often felt that someone was following him. This was not a good thing about returning to the common room, as it would easily expose his whereabouts. It seemed that those guys had not given up, but the Dark Lord had just fallen, so the Pure Bloods had restrained themselves a little. Anduin also attended the funeral of the Potters, but this time was different from the funerals of the Prewett brothers and Marlene McKinnon. The scale was very grand, and there were many people who came to mourn. After all, they were heroes who had overthrown Voldemort. Not only did most of the members of the Order of the Phoenix and the Ministry of Magic come, but all the members of the Wizengamot Council were dressed up, and people from all walks of life came to give them a bouquet of flowers. In order to commemorate the outstanding contributions of James, Lily and Harry, the Ministry of Magic also specially made a statue of the 3 of them in Godric's Hollow, and shielded it with a shielding spell to prevent it from being discovered by Muggles. The funeral was so lively that it even made him feel absurd. Those who came to mourn were not there to remember the deceased Potters, but to celebrate the fall of the Dark Lord. The funeral scene simply became a weird social scene. Everyone said they were mourning, but they never stopped smiling. Many members of the Wizengamot Council originally supported or secretly supported the Dark Lord. But now they all looked sad, and even hypocritically praised the Potters. Seeing this scene made Anduin feel a little sick, so after Dumbledore finished reading the eulogy, Anduin placed a hyacinth in front of the mausoleum that was already filled with flowers, and then took Hagrid away. After Anduin returned to Hogwarts, he buried himself in books, running back and forth between the library, Hagrid's hut, and the Slytherin dormitory every day, using busy study and research life to make him forget those painful memories. Recently, Anduin was preparing to make some more alchemical items that he was interested in, so he bought a lot of alchemical materials through Professor Bones's channel, which cost him more than 200 gold galleons. A few weeks later, another alchemical item was freshly baked in Anduin's hands. In the Slytherin dormitory, in Anduin's dormitory, a small silver-white metal hammer lay quietly on the desk. This is an octagonal hammer, 30 centimeters long, with a hammer head 10 centimeters long. The entire hammer head and hammer handle are made of agriba alloy and isomithril. The whole is bright silver like steel. The hammer handle is also covered with a layer of tight brown cowhide. It is just the right size to hold in the hand and is very easy to swing. Anduin has just engraved runes on the two hammer faces and sides of the hammer head. Anduin did not make this hammer as a weapon, but as an auxiliary and research tool. He engraved the runes of analysis and manifestation on one side of the hammer head. In this way, when encountering unfamiliar alchemical tools, just use this hammer to gently tap, and the rune patterns on the alchemical tools will appear, which is convenient for identification and deciphering runes. At the same time, when using it on damaged tools, it can also quickly find where the problem is. On the other side of the hammer, Anduin engraved the runes of solidification and strengthening. As long as you use this side to hit the alchemical tools, you can strengthen the alchemical tools. At the same time, repeated hammering can also make the alchemical materials and runes merge faster and make the connection between them closer. Anduin engraved the rune of harmless on the side of the hammer, so that this hammer will no longer have lethality. Even if you hit it hard against glass or porcelain, it will not cause any damage. As a tool to assist me in my research and alchemy, you will be called the Invulnerable Hammer from now on. Anduin gave this new tool a name that was not very meaningful. Next, let me try your effect. After thinking about it, Anduin took off his monocle and laid it flat on the table. Then he raised the hammer with his right hand and aimed the solidified side at the glasses. Caution was the best way to go. Anduin used only a small amount of force and gently knocked on the lens. Bang! A crisp sound of a hard object hitting was heard. Anduin felt that the invulnerable hammer absorbed a wisp of magic power along his right hand, which was transmitted along the hammer handle to the runes on the hammer surface, and then clearly acted on the lens at the bottom of the hammer. Anduin carefully moved the hammer away and saw that the monocle underneath was not damaged at all, which made him feel relieved. Then he plucked up his courage and knocked on the glasses. After a few minutes of beating, the runes engraved on the monocle began to flicker with a faint stream of light, which was very dazzling. Anduin picked up the lens and felt it in his palm. He could feel that the power of the brass and the runes had basically merged into one. He put it on again and cast the echo spell to test it. He found that the image transmitted from the glasses was more three-dimensional and clear. It seems that the effect is quite good. Anduin was happy. After that, Anduin took out the amulet that Lily gave him, and then pointed the side engraved with analysis at the amulet and began to knock gently. After a few light taps, a set of overlapping compound spells appeared on the amulet. It seemed that this was the rune engraved by Lily. Anduin quickly recorded the runes and prepared to study them to see if he could repair the amulet in the future. He had never tried to copy or repair the amulet before, mainly because he could not fully cast the Armor spell. But recently when he was practicing spells, he could feel that his physique and the magic channels in his body should soon be able to support him in casting some high-energy spells. Chapter 108 Another bad news. In this way, he could practice the Traceless Extension Charm, the Disillusion Charm, the Confusion Charm, the Armor Charm, and even the Apparition Charm. His practice of occlumency had also passed the entry stage and entered the mastery level. Now he could mobilize his magic power more smoothly and could quickly close his brain. He also started practicing Legislanism. As he had imagined, he could quickly get started with this kind of mind magic. However, this kind of magic required legilimency on living beings to practice. He had previously tried legitimacy on Hogwarts Scriptrine, but all he could receive was the speechless message flesh, flesh, flesh. Hagrid, Charles and others were his good friends, and he did not intend to try this magic on them. Anduin packed up and put the invulnerable hammer into the linen space bag. When he saw the bag again, he couldn't help but think of Cyrus, which made him feel a lot more upset. After packing up, Anduin adjusted his mood slightly, got up and left the dormitory. He was going to the Forbidden Forest hut to check on Charles' training. But when he walked out of the dormitory and came to the common room, he saw Wilkes, Travs and others. They seemed to have just heard some good news, and their faces were full of smiles. When he saw Anduin coming out, Wilkes also showed him a sneer, then raised his hand, showing his thumb across his neck, and looked at Anduin provocatively. Anduin narrowed his eyes slightly, ignored a few people, and quickly left the common room. At this time, Hogwarts was once again filled with the atmosphere of winter, with snowflakes floating in the sky. Anduin still remembered that at this time last year, his levitation spell officially entered the extraordinary level, but after a year of practice, flying in the air was still a bit difficult for him. Soon he passed through the circular stone pile and gradually approached Hagrid's hut. Charles, who was outside the hut, was not training at this time. Instead, he frowned and looked at the newspaper in his hand. When he found Anduin come in, he rushed to him. "Anduin, have you heard?" Charles looked at Anduin and said carefully. At this moment, Anduin felt something was wrong. Recalling the expressions of Travs and others in the common room, he frowned and asked, "What did you hear? What happened?" Charles had a conflicted look on his face. After thinking for a while, he said nervously, "Look for yourself. The Daily Prophet just issued an urgent news about the Longbottoms." Hearing Charles' words, Anduin hurriedly took the newspaper, which had just announced a piece of bad news that made Anduin collapse. "I am sending you an urgent news. At about 2 p.m. on November 21, Frank Longbottom and Alice Longbottom were found attacked and unconscious near Surrey, southwest of London. According to people familiar with the matter, the two Aurors were investigating the whereabouts of the Death Eaters at the time, but then they lost contact with the Auror command. The Aurors who tracked them down only found the Longbottom couple who had lost consciousness. They were suspected of being tortured by the Cruciatus curse and have been sent to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries for treatment. Please pay attention to follow-up reports for details." "What?" Anduin looked at the content in the newspaper in shock. "The Longbottom couple was attacked. I just found out about it. The Daily Prophet will only change its content like this when there is important news. I know you have a good relationship with the Longbottom couple." When Charles was explaining to Anduin, he found that all the snowflakes fluttering within a radius of more than 10 meters around him seemed to be frozen, and they were still in the air. "Anduin, Anduin!" Charles could feel the terrifying aura surging from the young man in front of him, and he shouted hurriedly, "I know." Anduin regained his calm expression again, and the snowflakes in the sky seemed to be finally saved by Newton and floated in the wind. Charles looked at Anduin with a calm expression, but felt the pressure that seemed to be real, and there was something scary brewing in Anduin's eyes. "Thank you, Charles, you can train by yourself today, I still have something to deal with," Anduin said to Charles in a cold tone. Charles was in no mood to train at this time. Looking at Anduin, who was not in a good state, he whispered, "Anduin, you have to calm down, don't do anything stupid." "Don't I look calm now?" "Don't worry, I have never been so calm as now," Anduin replied lightly. After that, Anduin walked towards Hogwarts Castle without looking back. Charles, who was watching him leave, didn't know what to do except worrying about him. Anduin walked back with a cold expression. It was unknown what was brewing in his heart. After entering the castle, he went straight to the Slytherin common room. Wilkes and others who were still in the common room were still laughing and playing. They didn't know what they were about to face. Seeing Anduin, who had just left for a while, suddenly came back, Wilkes sneered at him and said nothing, but Anduin smiled at him slightly, then hooked his finger and said, "Come out with me." Then Anduin turned around and walked out without looking at Wilkes' reaction. Wilkes saw this scene and hadn't reacted yet. Travs beside him turned around and asked him, "What should I do, Senior? Do you want to follow him?" "Humph, what are you afraid of? Let's go and meet this kid." After that, he led 6 people together and followed Anduin. Anduin walked around the main tower and came to an abandoned women's bathroom on the 2nd floor. Then he leaned against the windowsill and waited. Wilkes, who followed, saw Anduin standing there alone, and said with a smile, "Anduin, aren't you usually very arrogant?" You always ignore us and always avoid us. How come you have the courage to ask us out today? Hectares, this mudblood must have seen the news about the two idiots being attacked. The guys who go against us all end up like this. He must be panicking now, afraid that he will die if he walks out of the school gate, and wants to beg for mercy from us. Travs on the side laughed and mocked. Wilkes and others also laughed and leaned towards Anduin. I'm sorry. Anduin said. What did you say? I didn't hear you. Wilkes put his hand next to his ear in a pretentious manner, and said with a mocking face. What I said is, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you live so comfortably. Anduin sighed. Originally I just treated you as a group of children, and didn't want to be cruel to you. For what happened next, I can only solemnly apologize to you. Please forgive me. Chapter 109 Waterboarding. What did you say? Wilkes was stunned. Before everyone could say anything, Anduin's eyes widened and he slapped his hands together fiercely. Then Wilkes and others heard a whoosh sound from both sides, and the two giant hands made of magic slammed together fiercely. Because the two sides were very close, several people had no time to react, and were clamped by this huge force and knocked down fiercely. They felt a sharp pain on their bodies. Several people lost their ability to move in an instant, and their legs softened and fell to the ground. Wilkes and another fourth-year student reacted very quickly. They endured the pain and quickly got up and reached for their wands. But as soon as the two raised their wands to point at Anduin, they saw two spells bursting with dazzling glare. Before the two reacted, they were hit hard. Wands are flying. After Anduin completed this operation, he raised his left hand and chanted. Then he saw 7 different styles of wands flying into Anduin's hands. Since he was almost ambushed on Christmas last year, he paid attention to details such as disarming after the battle. Ouch! Several young wizards couldn't stand the severe pain and lay on the ground, crying out in pain. Help! Someone come quickly, save me! The 4th grade student who was also knocked down still knew to ask for help. Anduin, you bastard, you're dead, you're dead. Travs also fell to the ground. Although he was in pain all over, he still cursed Anduin. Anduin ignored the shouting and insults from those guys, but just walked towards Wilkes step by step, and smiled contemptuously. Don't worry, I have cast a shielding spell here in advance, no one will hear your voice. You, what are you going to do? Wilkes looked up at Anduin. I warn you, if you dare to disrespect me, sooner or later someone will deal with you. Apologize to us now if you know what's good for you, otherwise, Anduin was in no mood to listen to his helpless rage. He stepped on Wilkes' chest and said coldly, didn't I apologize to you at the beginning? What you should do now is to tell you everything you know. Say what? I don't know anything. Wilkes grabbed Anduin's foot on his chest and shouted. Tell me, I believe you were aware of the Death Eaters' attack on the Longbottoms and the whereabouts of other Death Eaters. Anduin had long suspected that these purebloods in Hogwarts were connected with the Death Eaters outside the school, but since they were all minors, he did not act rashly. Moreover, a head-on conflict with these guys would definitely be backlashed by the senior purebloods and the pureblood forces outside the school, so he has always maintained considerable restraint. But today, Anduin couldn't stand it. The tragedy of Lily's family happened too suddenly, and Voldemort, who had done it, had disappeared. The suspected traitor Cyrus was imprisoned in Azkaban, and he couldn't do anything. But the Longbottom family had a very close relationship with him. Anduin, who had already regarded Augusta as his elder, could imagine how sad she would be when she learned about what had happened to her children. So on the way back to the castle, Anduin had already started to plan his next move. It was easy to deal with these guys. What he needed to be wary of was the pressure from seniors and outside the school. He calculated the trump cards he had at the moment. Anduin thought that it would not be a big problem to deal with the oppression of the pureblood faction in the school. As for outside the school, at most he would not leave Hogwarts this year. Wilkes seemed to react to Anduin's question. The fear on his face gradually subsided, and he showed a mocking face and said, I thought, so you were for those naive fools. They are loyal to the wrong people and will naturally bear such consequences. If you have time to worry about them, you might as well worry about yourself, you darty. Anduin saw that Wilkes was no longer in the mood to talk nonsense, and kicked him hard in the stomach again. Wilkes hugged his stomach and curled up in pain. It seems that not all trash are cowardly. Very good. I hope you can be so stubborn next time. Anduin sneered, then waved his wand and hung all the people except Wilkes upside down. Anduin had learned this trick of the hanging bell spell from Cyrus. Anduin then took out a small stack of paper from his body and said to Wilkes, "It seems that I have to apologize for what happened next. I have never used this on a minor." Anduin then cast a spell to tie Wilkes' hands and feet tightly. Wilkes, who was completely controlled, saw Anduin's series of actions and couldn't help but feel nervous. He shouted loudly, What are you doing? Let me go, ugh." Wilkes, who was still shouting, saw a piece of paper slowly enlarged in his eyes until it completely covered his face. Clear water like a spring, he only heard Anduin recite a spell, and then a stream of water soaked the paper and Wilkes' nostrils, which made him completely unable to breathe. He could only struggle in pain like a fish dragged onto land. "You my blood, what are you going to do to Wilkes? Do you want to kill him?" Travis, who was hanging upside down in the air, saw Anduin being so cruel and shouted with a trembling voice, "Noisy." Anduin backhanded a soundwave expulsion spell to hit Travis, and then no matter how hard he shouted, no sound came out. Wilkes, who was lying on the ground, struggled hard at the beginning, and now twitched weakly, which made the people who were hung upside down feel cold. Anduin saw that the time was almost up, so he took off the wet tissue on Wilkes' face. Wilkes, who was in contact with the air again, couldn't help but breathe heavily, and then choked himself hard, and couldn't stop coughing loudly. "How about it, do you know something now?" Anduin asked lightly. "Pooh." After Wilkes finally recovered, he heard Anduin's words and spit at him viciously. But the saliva just left his mouth and then quietly stopped in the air, and then splashed back at Wilkes, which made his face even more ferocious, looking at Anduin as if he wanted to bite him to death. "I admire people with strong will, because I am too. It seems that we had to spend more time." Anduin saw that Wilkes was still hard, and couldn't help but sneered. Then Wilkes began to enjoy endless torture. Anduin treated him with water torture again and again, just like calmly handling materials when cooking. Every time, he would remove the wet paper towel when Wilkes was almost out of breath, and then wait for Wilkes to recover a little before torturing him again. Anduin didn't ask anything in the first few times, and operated on his own. After doing this 7 or 8 times in a row, Wilkes was so tired that he could only twitch and didn't even have the strength to struggle. "I have to say sorry to everyone again. The editor told me that there are still many recommendations to go, so it is estimated that it will take until it is put on the shelves before it can be restored to 3 updates. Sorry. I'm sorry." Chapter 110 Manner. At this time, Anduin showed a smile that he thought was very gentle, and said, "Well, do you remember anything now?" Hectares, Wilkes gasped for breath, looking at Anduin's devilish expression. What do you want to know? Tell me, who attacked the Longbottoms?" Anduin asked with a sneer when he saw Wilkes loosen up. I only know that Rabaston, Bellatrix, and the Rodolphus family of the Lestrange family have been on the run recently. Those 2 may have been targeted by them. I really don't know anything else." Wilkes was about to cry now, and he felt that his lungs were constantly wailing to him. The Lestrange family. I remember Bella seemed to be Cyrus' sister, could it be? Anduin muttered a few words in a low voice, and then asked, "Where are they now, or where could they be?" "I really don't know. My uncle died last Christmas. Except for my uncle, the other people in my family don't have a high status among the Death Eaters. If you want to ask, go ask Travs. Their family has a higher status among the Death Eaters," Wilkes said, sobbing. He was really scared now. He had never received such torture since he was a child. Now he didn't even dare to look Anduin in the eyes. Travs, who was hanging upside down, had lost the effect of the sonic repulsion spell. Hearing that Wilkes had sold him out, he was furious and yelled again, "Wilkes, what do you mean? How can I know something you don't know? Anduin, if you dare to touch me, my uncle will not let you go." Anduin stood up from Wilkes' side and knocked him out with a stun spell. Then he looked at Travs quietly, and his dark and deep pupils did not reveal any emotion, which made Travs feel creepy. Golden Bell falls to the ground. With the sound of Anduin's spell, Travs fell heavily from midair to the ground. Before Travs started to cry out in pain, he saw 2 feet stop in front of him. When he looked up, he was facing Anduin's expressionless face. At this time, Travs swallowed his saliva and really didn't know what to say. "When I was dealing with Wilkes just now, I seem to have forgotten something." Anduin grinned. "I obviously know legilimency, how could I forget to use it?" "You, don't come over here." Travs felt that he was tightly wrapped by the air around him, as if he was being pinched by a pair of big hands. He was slowly pulled up from the ground and sent to Anduin upright, with his eyes level with Anduin's eyes. Look at me!" Anduin shouted. Travis looked at Anduin's eyes reflexively, as if he saw a pair of black holes that constantly absorbed his thoughts, and then his sight was deeply absorbed by the pair of dark pupils. For a young wizard like Travis who had weak willpower and no experience, his brain was like a naked girl lying on a large bed with a piece of gauze hanging on it. As long as the curtain was gently lifted, all the information would be exposed to Anduin's vision. Anduin's sight seemed to penetrate through layers of fog, opening the door to Travis' memory. The surroundings were surging, and clouds and mists were constantly rolling up. After a burst of clouds and entanglements, they turned into a simple and gorgeous manor. The sight gradually pulled in, and then passed through the gorgeous gate of the manor and the corridors decorated with various antique silverware. A young face with a gloomy face appeared in front of Travis. Anduin had seen that person before. It was Sample, Travis' uncle, the Death Eater. It seemed that in Sample's memory, this uncle made him feel very safe. "Sample, the majesty of the Dark Lord will soon cover this land. Watch, the Travis family will soon gain more power." Sample's uncle laughed and showed off something to him. His uncle seemed to say something else, but the scene turned into thick fog again and reassembled. The view was placed in a dark house, surrounded by various bookshelves and alchemical materials. It looked like a library and treasure room. Sample's mother, the young woman with long light golden hair, appeared beside him. "The Dark Lord asked us to transfer some dark magic items to my brother, who is now the owner of Malfoy Manor," the young woman said as she walked with Sample, and then took a few items from the surrounding shelves, including an ordinary-looking notebook, a strange statue, etc. "Mom, what is this?" Sample pointed to a 1-meter-long thing that looked like a dried root next to him and asked. "It's a dragon heart tendon of the Hesperidian black dragon. I originally wanted to cut it and make it into a wand. Such a long complete dragon heart tendon is rare. Maybe I can make it into a good alchemical prop for you in the future." The young woman laughed. "Remember this, these are the foundation for the Travis family to continue to prosper in the wizarding world." The young woman warned Sample. "Aren't we born noble? We have noble blood in our bodies, and we are naturally different from those dirty muggles." Sample stared at the young woman and said, "This is what your uncle told you again." The young woman looked at Sample unhappily. "Even if we are of noble blood, we can't get carried away. Anyway, you just remember it." The memory condensed into a picture and turned into a cloud again. After rolling and expanding continuously, it turned into another scene. In another gorgeous manner, the young woman pulled Sample to look at the two people opposite, or should I say 3 people. One of the adult men had neatly combed long golden hair. Next to the man sat a young woman with her hair in a bun, holding a little boy in her arms. "Lucius, Narcissa, long time no see, is little Draco so big now?" the blonde young woman said with a smile. "Yulia, you still look so good. Lucius heard that you were coming and prepared a rich snack for you." Narcissa smiled on the side. Dobby. Lucius shouted, "I'm sorry, the house elf we bought recently is not very sensible." After Lucius shouted a few times, a house elf who looked young appeared out of thin air beside his master. "Master, what can I do for you?" "You idiot, why are you so slow to react?" Lucius couldn't help but raised his cane and hit Dobby twice. "Where is the dessert I asked you to prepare?" "I'm sorry, master, I'm sorry, Dobby will bring it to you right away." Dobby begged for mercy in a low voice nervously. Chapter 111 Yaxley. "Okay, I'm here for a serious matter this time. The Dark Lord ordered me to leave these props with you. Remember to keep them well. You have a small target here and the treasure house is relatively secret. Do you understand what this means? This represents the Master's trust in you and is also a great honor." Yulia took out a package and said. When Lucius heard the Dark Lord, he immediately shrank his head nervously. "Really? Thank you for the grace of the Master, so that I have the honor to serve the future ruler of the magic world." Lucius took the package respectfully and left the place, apparently to store things. Yulia, who stayed where she was, smiled and looked at Narcissa. "By the way, Narcissa, how is your sister Bella doing recently? I haven't seen her for a long time. She has been with the Dark Lord, and I haven't seen them for a long time. I heard that her husband was ordered to build another secret base in the Moor Valley in Surrey. Maybe we can gather there soon." Narcissa smiled. After the two young women chatted for a few more words, Lucius came out, but he was still holding something in his hand. After handing the item to his sister, he said, "I know the Travis family has that thing. This was collected by my father from an Egyptian wizard many years ago. It is said to be a very rare prototype rune. Unfortunately, my father had that incident later, so he was unable to completely decipher it until his death. Now the magic power of this collecting crystal is about to dissipate, and I can't transfer it completely to other collecting crystals. You can collect it on that one. Yulia took the crystal and looked at Lucius with a complaint. Look at you, you don't know how to be more motivated. You can't even preserve your father's legacy well. Lucius curled his lips. He knew that his magic level was limited, otherwise he would not have entrusted it to Yulia. At this point, the scene turned into clouds and dissipated again. Anduin also wended a legilimency spell, muttering in a low voice, Mole Valley in Surrey County, very close to the place where the Longbottoms were attacked. It is very likely that they are the ones. Also, these pure blood families have a lot of good things. Only a dozen seconds had passed, but Sample felt like several hours had passed. All the secrets of his body were seen through by the man in front of him. His face flushed with shame and anger, and he looked at Anduin viciously. How dare you peek into the secrets of the noble Trav's family? Sample said hatefully. Hehe, in my eyes, you so-called noble pure blood families are a bunch of jokes. You should ask yourself, how can you have such courage to dare to mess with me? Anduin threw Travs to the ground with contempt, and then kicked him hard. Then he waved his wand, and everyone floating in the air fell to the ground. Anduin smiled sarcastically at these guys and said, I don't have time to deal with you today. You have wasted enough of my time. But I have confiscated your wands. If you want them back, each of you should prepare a ransom of 20 gold galleons. After all, this is your first wand. Anduin sneered and turned to leave the bathroom. Travs watched Anduin leave triumphantly, and he was so angry that he punched the floor of the bathroom, and then he couldn't help but grin in pain. What should we do now? A pure-blooded little wizard next to him asked tremblingly. He was still frightened by what had just happened. What else can we do? First wake up that idiot Wilkes, and then see if there is any way. Travs said hatefully. What? That guy took all our wands? Wilkes exclaimed when he woke up. Yes, Senior Wilkes, that guy is too domineering. Not only did he beat us up, he also stole our things. A pure-blooded little wizard complained. Damn it, why don't we report it to the dean? Anyway, that guy started it first. Let's get the wand back first and find a chance to deal with him later. Another pure-blooded little wizard said. No, this kind of scandal can't be made public, and it's hard to accuse him if he's not caught on the spot. What if the bastard destroys all our wands in a rage? Even if the dean helps us, he won't be punished in substance. At most, he will be put in solitary confinement for a while. The little wizard who is also in the 4th grade said. In this way, let's go to Prefect Yaxley and ask him to help us think of a solution. I must return today's shame 100 times 1,000 times to the mudblood. Wilkes said viciously. Dare to disrespect the Travs family, I must make him pay with blood. Sample Travs was getting angrier and angrier, shouting with deep resentment. Yes, he must pay with blood. Everyone responded in unison. After thinking about it, everyone packed up and walked towards the sliding common room in a menacing manner. After a while, a crying sound of woo was heard from a cubicle in the bathroom, and a ghost of a female student wearing glasses floated out from it. It's so scary, that little wizard scared Myrtle to death. Luckily I just hid well, otherwise I might die again. Myrtle wiped her tears and recalled everything that had just happened in the bathroom. The aura of the little wizard scared her so much that she didn't dare to show her head. In the sliding dormitory, in Rowley Yaxley's room, a group of little wizards who were beaten by Anduin squeezed in and kept telling Yaxley everything they had just experienced. So, the 7 of you were taught a lesson by a second-year muggle wizard. And you lost your wands? Yaxley looked at everyone speechlessly. You were a disgrace to the pure blood wizard family. That guy is cruel and doesn't take us seriously at all. He even said he will cause trouble for you in the future. Wilkes said with exaggeration. Humph. Yaxley glared at Wilkes, then said angrily, you ignorant little bastard. Yeah, that guy is so arrogant, you have to stand up for us. Let's go and cause trouble for the kid tonight and let him know how powerful we are. Travs said hatefully. Yaxley squinted his eyes and thought for a while, then said in a deep voice, no, Professor Bones has been keeping a close eye on me recently, and Vanessa will definitely stand up for the guy. At most, he will suffer a little in Hogwarts. Then what do you say we should do? Wilkes asked. Wait until he leaves Hogwarts before you do it. I know you've been keeping an eye on that guy. Christmas is coming soon. Keep an eye on him during the holidays. As long as he leaves school, we'll be able to catch him. Yaxley said. I really want to update for the National Day, but the editor told me to hold back. I'm holding back. Oh. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 112 Report. What if he never leaves school during the holidays? Travs asked. Then wait for the Easter holidays. If he still hides his head during the Easter holidays, we will wait for the summer vacation. If he still hides his head during the summer vacation, we will wait for next year. He will be a third year next year, right? Yaxley laughed. What do you mean? Wilkes seemed to realize something. Yes, the third year students will always go to Hogsmeade to hand out, and Professor Bones should leave next year. The Dark Lord's curse is no joke. Vanessa will graduate soon, and Slytherin will be mine by then. Don't you want to restore the glory of the pure blood family and make the guy pay with blood? Let him bleed properly next year, in every sense. Yaxley laughed grimly. Then, what about our wands? Do we have to buy a new one? That's our first wand, the one with the highest degree of fit. And let the guy continue to be so arrogant for half a year? Trav said, unconvinced. Why are you in such a hurry? A poisonous snake always has to lie dormant before it can kill with one blow. Yaxley touched his chin. As for the wand, you just pay the ransom and redeem it first. Be patient and don't provoke him again in the next 6 months. What? Do you really have to pay that guy? That's the same as bowing to that guy. Travs couldn't figure it out. This is also to teach you a lesson. It's not convenient for us seniors to move around in school recently. Bones is not a simple guy. I always feel that someone is watching me. I have to wait until he leaves before I can let go. Yaxley frowned slightly. His strength was not weak. He could sense that kind of inexplicable sense of being watched, but he really didn't understand how this was done. On the other side, Anduin came to Professor Bones' office and found that the door of the professor's office was wide open. Professor Bones was sitting leisurely at his desk. The rooms on the edge of the monocle in front of him kept emitting a faint light. It can be seen that Professor Bones has been using this alchemical tool to observe something. Professor. Anduin saw that Bones' mind was basically on the glasses, so he stepped forward and called softly. Bones came back to his senses and found that it was Anduin. He nodded and said, Anduin, what's wrong? It doesn't seem to be evening yet. Have you heard about the Longbottom couple? Anduin said in a deep voice. Bones frowned upon hearing this. I just received a message. Emling, who was in charge of taking care of them, sent me a message saying that she is out of danger, but she has not yet woken up because she was tortured by the Cruciatus curse for a long time when she was attacked. Anduin felt relieved when he heard that the two are out of danger, and then said, I received a message from Slytherin House and I know who attacked the Longbottom couple. Bones sat up straight upon hearing this, stared at Anduin and asked, Are you sure? Well, the source of the information should be very reliable. Anduin recalled the information he got from Travs and Wilkes' torture, and said with certainty. Who is it? After a long period of contact, Bones knew that Anduin was still very reliable. I heard that Rabaston, Bellatrix, Rodolphus and others from the Lestrange family have a secret base near the Morvalley in Surrey County, which is very close to where the Longbottoms were attacked. It is possible that they found the two patrolling nearby. Anduin said. Professor Bones looked at Anduin again after hearing this. This young man not only knew the attackers, but also knew where they were hiding. This was not like what he said, information that he could easily find out. Anduin, I know you have a good relationship with the Longbottoms, but there is often only one step between heaven and hell. Even the Dark Lord was a young and promising talent before he fell. Do you understand what I mean? Professor Bones said to him earnestly. I understand what you mean. Don't worry. I have a clear understanding of myself, but, Anduin paused, I'm a Slytherin after all. It is not my habit to follow the rules. Bones nodded slightly. He knew that some things could only be mentioned briefly, so he said seriously, the Lestrange family has been wanted by the Ministry of Magic for a long time. I have also considered whether this matter is related to them, but we still don't know where they are hiding now. Your information is very timely. I will inform Moody immediately. Anduin nodded, then turned and walked out of the office. Bones looked at Anduin, who was leaving, with great concern. Such a young man with a promising future must not take a detour. That night, in the Slytherin dormitory, Anduin saw Rosie who came to find him, and couldn't help but smile and said, "I didn't expect them to send you to find me." Rosie received an order from Wilkes and others to help redeem the wand. Wilkes and others were too embarrassed to face Anduin again. "You, what did you do to Senior Wilkes?" Now his eyes turn red whenever he hears your name. Rosie was very timid when he saw Anduin, but he still asked quietly. "Then you have to ask him himself. Don't talk nonsense." "Did you bring the money?" Anduin sneered. "This is 140 gold galleons. How did you do it?" "They are willing to pay to redeem the wands." Although Rosie didn't know what happened before, he also knew that Anduin had confiscated the wands of those people. Originally, Rosie thought that they would gather people to take them back, but he knew that they would be so cowardly. It seems that they are not very stupid, or there are still some smart people. Anduin did not directly answer Rosie's question. He took the gold coin and answered irrelevantly. "What do you mean?" Rosie asked, puzzled. "They don't dare to start a big fight in the school now. They have to wait until I relax my vigilance, right?" Anduin sneered. "Have they revealed any plans to deal with me?" "No, but I see that they are all very angry and they will definitely not let it go." Rosie recalled the expressions of everyone just now and said, "I won't let them go so easily. Go back and keep a close eye on those guys for me. Remember to notify me if there is any movement." Anduin instructed. "I know, but are you really ready to go to war with them? I see that they will not deal with Gryffindor like they did. If there is a bloody conflict, they may be expelled from school, and may even be imprisoned in Azkaban." Rosie shrank his head and said. Chapter 113 The Secret of Pure Blood. HMPH, he'll be caught, right? Besides, I'm the victim. Okay, go back. Contact me if you need anything. Anduin said disdainfully. Rosie nodded and walked out of Anduin's room. It seems that my guess is right. Those guys don't dare to fight directly in the school recently. Professor Bones has been monitoring the entire college. But Professor Bones obviously didn't know about my fight in the bathroom in the afternoon. It seems that the professor is focusing on those senior students. Anduin thought about all this and had a basic idea in his mind. It seems that we have to hurry up. They will definitely not let it go. In the next 6 months, we need to start the plan. Anduin thought with determination. A few days later, the Christmas vacation of Hogwarts began. Anduin made up his mind not to leave the campus during this year's vacation. He will use all his energy to arm himself and improve his combat effectiveness as much as possible. After the Christmas holiday, Anduin moved to the Forbidden Forest cottage again. In the many correspondences with Augusta, he learned about the current status of the Longbottoms. Due to the crazy torture of the Death Eater's Crusoe curse, Frank and Alice suffered almost irreversible injuries and almost completely lost their memories. They can only live in St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and Maladies for care. From the words of Augusta's reply, Anduin could really feel how painful she was, but she forced herself to be strong because the lonely little Neville needed her. "If you do it on the first day, don't blame me for doing it on the 15th. Anduin's eyes revealed a dangerous cold light. Hagrid was very happy that Anduin could return to the cottage to accompany him during Christmas, but he stayed in his small room almost all the time except for eating, and there were often ping-pong sounds. Because it was Christmas, Anduin took the initiative to ask Hagrid for a chimera beast skin as a gift. The chimera is a magical creature native to Greece that is very bloodthirsty and violent. It has a lion's head, a goat's body and a dragon's tail. Hagrid used to cover his pillow with it. The leather is very tough. At dinner that day, Hagrid saw Anduin holding a book about pure blood families and reading it with relish. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong, Anduin? Are you still reading this kind of book? After all, knowing yourself and the enemy, you can fight 100 battles without danger." Anduin replied indifferently. 100 battles? What do you mean? Why do I feel a sense of danger? Hagrid frowned. Nothing. Anduin didn't say much, shaking his head. "Do you know? In fact, since the International Statute of Secrecy came into effect, it has been opposed by most pure-blood wizards. They have gathered believers more than once and tried to launch a full-scale war with Muggles." "Really? It's terrible," Hagrid said. "But many pure-blood wizards have begun to maintain the Statute of Secrecy after many years, which is why many pure-blood families have not turned to the Death Eaters. Anduin recently borrowed a lot of books, journals and gossip publications related to wizard families from the library." "Oh? Why is that?" Hagrid asked curiously. "On the one hand, it is for profit. Many pure blood families maintain the statute of secrecy while intermarrying with Muggles. At the same time, they have an extra large amount of assets and land through transactions with Muggles. Many pure blood families have a place in the upper class of the Muggle world. They naturally will not let those Death Eaters who hate Muggles destroy this situation. Anduin teased. What about the other side? On the other side. Anduin blinked and looked at Hagrid. Guess who will win if the wizard world and the Muggle world go to war? How should I know? But wizards can use magic, so wizards should have the upper hand in the battle. Hagrid thought for a while and said truthfully. Anduin shook his head. No, if the two sides really go to war, I guarantee that the wizard world will not be able to withstand the offensive of Muggles. You are not a Muggle, so you don't know. The power of Muggle weapons is not what wizards can imagine. It is good for wizards to escape from the search and attack of Muggles. Many pure blood families have a clear understanding of this due to long-term contact with Muggles. They don't want to die because of such stupid suicide behavior. What? Are Muggles so scary? But I have seen many Muggles. They don't even have magic power. They can't make something disappear out of thin air, nor can they turn a mouse into a teacup. Hagrid was shocked by Anduin's remarks. You're right. Wizards have a great advantage in this kind of supernatural power, but in terms of destructive power alone, the two sides are not at the same level. Have you seen magic that can destroy an island with just a flick of the finger? Anduin asked with a smile. Hiss, are you kidding? How can there be such magic? Hagrid looked incredulous. But Muggles do, so maintaining and protecting the statute of secrecy is the most responsible way for the wizarding world. But, Anduin groaned. But what? But if wizards remain ignorant of the Muggle world and their understanding of Muggles remains the same as it was hundreds of years ago, it's easy for them to develop an almost ignorant sense of superiority like the Death Eaters, and that's the most dangerous thing. Anduin shrugged. Are you saying that unique understanding will give rise to an organization like the Death Eaters? Oh my god, that's too scary. Doesn't that mean that even if the Death Eaters are eliminated, a group of people like the Death Eaters will appear again in a few decades? Hagrid asked with his eyes wide open. Anduin nodded and said, it seems that you have also realized it. In fact, this situation has happened before. Grindelwald, who almost swept the magic world, actually took advantage of this. Even now, there are still organizations like the Purifiers in the American magic world, and the Pure Land Society in Northern Europe is also very active. Since many wizards have never been in contact with the Muggle world, it is easy for them to have an inexplicable sense of superiority over Muggles who cannot do magic, and then be bewitched, used, or coerced by those with ulterior motives, and gradually fall into depravity. Oh my god. Anduin's words almost overturned Hagrid's understanding of the world. Is the magic world in other countries so terrible? It was like someone told him that this seemingly peaceful and stable world was actually full of terrorists. Chapter 114 Phase Boots. So, only when you are strong can you truly control your destiny, otherwise even ensuring your own safety will be a big problem. Anduin closed the book and smiled, but these are too far away from us at the moment, let's just enjoy Christmas dinner. By the way, this is my Christmas gift to you. Anduin took out a silver white metal coin and pushed it in front of Hagrid. Oh? What is this? It doesn't look like a silver sickle. Hagrid picked up the metal coin and looked at it carefully. Well, I call it a message coin at present. It is not fully functional at present. The side with a long sword is the front, and the side with Ouroboros is the back. It is an alchemical prop I made recently. Anduin smiled. Message coin, can this little thing send messages? Hagrid turned the metal coin over and over again, and sure enough, he saw a simple oriental longsword printed on one side and an Ouroboros printed on the other. Yes, if you are in danger, input magic power into the front side with the longsword printed on it. I will be alerted and can immediately transmit your current location to me. I will come to support you immediately. If you just want to find me for something, input magic power into the Ouroboros on the back side. I will receive the message and come to find you in the hut. Anduin felt that the current magic world did not have a device that could directly alarm, which was simply too backward. Therefore, based on the knowledge in the book application of contact rooms given to him by Cyrus last year, he imitated the FLA network and made such an alchemical prop. However, the current function is still very weak, and the range of communication can only cover the entire Hogwarts. It cannot communicate in real time like the FLA network. As samples, he did make a lot of them, and sent a few copies to Vivian, Charles and others as Christmas gifts. Then it will be much more convenient when I want to find you in the future. You are really smart. Hagrid heard about the function of this little gadget and tried it repeatedly with great interest. Anduin also took out a booklet, which was also an alchemical item, linked to several telegram coins he had sent out. As long as the message was received, it would be seen on it soon. The two chatted, played with new alchemical items, ate hot pot and sang songs, and spent this year's Christmas peacefully. In the days that followed, Anduin stayed in the hut every day to study spells and try to make various alchemical items. At the same time, owls from the outside world kept coming and going to his hut. Many of them were letters and gifts from friends. Charles and Professor McGonagall still sent some Quidditch peripherals as gifts. Vivian knew that Anduin liked to read books, so she also sent some magic books as gifts. Among them, Professor Bones was very generous and sent him 3 ounces of isomithril and a set of carving knives. It can be seen that Professor Bones is very optimistic about Anduin's alchemical talent, which is also a disguised encouragement. I hope he can go further on this road. From Professor Bones' letter, Anduin learned that the Longbottoms' mental trauma was more serious than he had imagined. They could no longer remember anyone and even lost the ability to take care of themselves. They would have to stay in the hospital for care in the future. The Lestrange family's base in Surrey was found by the Strikers and Aurors led by Moody, and a fierce battle broke out there. At the cost of 2 Aurors being seriously injured, Bella and others were successfully captured. They have been taken to Azkaban. In the letter, Professor Bones also expressed his gratitude for the information provided by Anduin. Anduin shook his head speechlessly. In the case of a surprise attack, the Aurors actually suffered casualties. He couldn't help but question the tactical qualities of these Aurors. Don't you know how to deploy defenses in advance and attack in stages? Why are the regular troops fighting like children fighting, rushing forward stupidly? Anduin thought helplessly. Just as the Christmas holiday was about to end, an owl came to Anduin's cabin with a large package. It's finally here. He opened the package and saw a pair of brand new leather boots. If Hagrid was here, he would definitely see that they were made of the same chimera skin he had given him. Anduin spent 5 galleons to make them at the Toffin clothing store in Diagon Alley. They were made of the same chimera skin. The quality of the finished product was very good. He planned to make these leather boots into alchemical props. It's time to start building all-terrain tactical weapons. Anduin smiled happily. All-terrain tactical weapons are a complete set of tactical equipment conceived by Anduin, including 5 modules: sensing, interference, mobility, protection, and killing. If they can be fully assembled, they are designed to build a tactical model that can fight against all-terrain, all-round, and all-category enemies. This pair of leather boots is one of them. As one of the alchemical carriers of the mobile module, Anduin plans to enchant it with runes such as shock absorption, silent adsorption, enhancement, and change. In this way, it can play a very good role whether it is lurking, crossing terrain, short-distance burst, or long-distance raid. After all, his current flight is still unstable, and it is easy to be used as a target when riding a broom in battle. Only by increasing the speed of instantaneous burst can he use his body skills to gain an advantage in battle. The relevant runes have been fully mastered in his hard study and practice day and night. The next thing to do was to test the results. It took Anduin 2 full days to engrave the runes on this pair of animal leather boots, and then use the invulnerable hammer to reinforce and strengthen the props with runes. At noon the next day, all the little wizards in Hogwarts had actually returned to school. They were going to start classes the next day, and it was also that day he returned to the Slytherin dormitory. Anduin gave this new equipment a funny name, Fave's Boots. He put on the newly made leather boots and knocked his heels against each other. Light-colored magic runes began to appear on the boots. He raised his right leg and pushed forward. With a whoosh, Anduin rushed forward a distance like a gust of wind. Anduin looked back and nodded. It only took more than 1 second to travel 20 meters, so 100 meters is more than 6 seconds, which is faster than the current Olympic champion. It's good enough. Next, I will test the terrain crossing and physical consumption. After thinking about it, he ran wildly along the path and soon came to the circular stone pile. He jumped with all his strength and jumped more than 2 meters high. He stepped on the side of a stone pillar, and then ran up the wall completely against the law of gravity. After reaching a height of more than 10 meters, he did a backflip, broke away from the stone pillar and fell down, and then landed steadily like a gymnast, with his hands stretched up, making it look like a gymnast landing. Chapter 115 Memory Magic. The adsorption effect is qualified, the shock absorption effect is qualified, and the silent reaction is qualified. The physical energy consumption is about 3 times that of normal running, but the fatigue is much greater than that of normal exercise. Is it because the load on the body has a limit? It seems that it cannot be used as a regular prop. While testing the effect of the face shoes, Anduin felt the operation of various functions of the body, and roughly understood this way of movement. With the current physical condition, if the speed is set to the limit, it can only last about 10 minutes. If it is slightly activated and used as a boost for exercise, there is no time limit. Anduin nodded thoughtfully, and then walked to the library. He planned to spend some time to supplement some knowledge of memory magic. The Longbottom couple was mentally traumatized and lost all their memories. Although it is unlikely, Anduin still wanted to try to find a way to help them recover their memories. Madam Pincer, where are the books on memory magic? Anduin asked Madam Pincer after arriving at the library. It's Anduin. Madam Pincer was very familiar with Anduin, and she often saw him running to the library. Memory magic, let me think, you can go to the 27th row of bookshelves, there should be some there. Thank you. After arriving at the corresponding location, Anduin began to look through it in detail. After a while, Anduin took out a book Introduction to the Forgetting Spell and read it in detail. After flipping through it for a while, it was basically some spell casting techniques of the Forgetting Spell, which was not helpful for learning memory magic. He put the book back and started to look through it one by one. Oh, my dear Junior, are you looking for learning materials for memory magic? A slightly frivolous voice came from behind Anduin. Anduin looked back and found that it was a boy who looked like a senior wizard. He had light brown hair and was wearing a flamboyant blue robe. He could smell a strong perfume from 2 meters away. Yes, this senior. Anduin rarely interacted with other wizards in the school. He didn't know this senior, so he could only reply politely. Ha ha, then you are lucky. As a wizard who is proficient in all kinds of spells and is popular among girls of all grades, if you don't mind, I'm willing to give you some pointers. The boastful man showed a very charming smile. Anduin couldn't help but reveal a tangled expression. He wanted to tell the senior that basically all the wizards who were proficient in spells in Hogwarts had joined the spells club, and he knew all of them, but he didn't know you. However, Anduin felt that it was a bit unkind to refuse directly, so he just responded, really? Then please give me some pointers, senior. Since you asked sincerely, as someone who is deeply loved by students of all grades, I naturally can't turn a blind eye. I suggest you take a look at this. After all, helping young wizards grow and cultivating talents for the British magic world is also that driving force that drives me to keep moving forward. The boastful male wizard tiptoed, twirled his hands and walked to their side of the bookshelf, took out a book with an exaggerated thickness, and handed it over. This book Brain and Memory should be able to help you. I only read part of this book, and I can use the Forget spell to perfection. The man raised his eyebrows at Anduin and blinked. Anduin took the book with great suspicion. Just when he was about to say something, a familiar voice suddenly came from the side. Lockhart, what are you doing? Are you harassing the students of our college again? Anduin turned around and saw that it was Senior Vanessa. Oh, Vanessa, I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm sorry that I didn't reply to your love letter as soon as possible. You have to know that I always have to take care of the girls in our college first, don't you think? Lockhart smiled and talked to Vanessa, but as he was talking, Vanessa took out her wand and looked at him with a bad look. Lockhart was so scared that he shrank his head and turned around and ran away. In a few seconds, he disappeared from Anduin's sight. Huh. You run really fast. Anduin sighed, then looked at Vanessa. Senior, you? Anduin just heard it. Could this senior have sent love letters to others? I didn't expect to hear such gossip when I came to the library. It's not what you think. Vanessa said with a gloomy face. That guy is Gilderoy Lockhart, who is in the same grade as me. He is a shameless and arrogant idiot. He likes to brag to others when he has nothing to do. All the love letters are fake. He pretended to be other female students and sent love letters to himself on Valentine's Day 2 years ago. He received hundreds of love letters in one day, even from Professor McGonagall. Wow, he is really brave. Anduin raised his eyebrows. No one likes that guy, so he likes to show off to people like you who don't know him, otherwise who would give him a good face. Vanessa pouted. Well, you all graduated this year, and I guess I won't have a chance to see this senior in the future. Anduin smiled. Well, I will be busy preparing for the wizard's final exam in the second half of the year. You should pay attention. I know some people in the academy don't like you. Vanessa heard Anduin mention graduation and remembered something and said. Thank you for your reminder, Senior Sister Vanessa. Anduin nodded. Now those people don't just dislike me, they are ready to eat me alive. After chatting with Anduin for a few words, Vanessa turned and left. Anduin looked at the big book in his hand. Anyway, he didn't read anything, so he opened it and took a look. You don't know until you read it. As soon as Anduin saw it, he was attracted by the content of the book. The book elaborated on memory magic, thought runes, and related knowledge of the brain area. It also had a very detailed description of the composition of the forgetting spell and memory. It seems that this Senior Lockhart is not useless. This book is enough for me to digest for a while. Anduin happily borrowed the book from the library. Back to the slurring common room, ignoring the hostile eyes of many pure-blood wizards, he quietly returned to his dormitory. The following days passed in a strange atmosphere. Those pure-blood wizards hated Anduin to death, but they did not do anything out of line. Anduin was happy to be free. He stayed at home every day, attended classes, participated in the spell club, studied runes with Professor Bones, supervised Charles' training, found time to make alchemical tools, and studied memory magic. Chapter 116 Night Tour. Although Travs and Wilkes did not have a direct conflict with Anduin, they still sent people to secretly monitor Anduin's every move. However, after just over a month, those responsible for tracking and monitoring were frequently attacked. They were either hung in the corridor or stripped naked and thrown into the nearby women's restroom. But when they were asked what happened, these guys collectively lost their memory and could not remember what happened at all. After several incidents, the pure-blood wizards dared not to follow Anduin anymore, which made Wilkes, Travs and others hate him. But Anduin didn't care. The campus life in Hogwarts gradually returned to peace. Since the disappearance of the Dark Lord, the number of pranks in Hogwarts has soared exponentially, which made the naughty ghost peeps gradually active. In previous years, peeps rarely came out to move. Anduin had consulted Professor Flitwick about this strange phenomenon. Professor Flitwick told him that Peeves was born with the entire building of Hogwarts Castle. It was the oldest and most special ghost, closely linked to the entire school. It would be affected by the pranks and emotions of the entire school. In previous years, the wizarding world was shrouded in darkness, and there were not enough laughter and pranks on campus, so Peeves became listless and sometimes even stopped moving. But now it is different. But this made Filch very angry, so he patrolled the campus day and night, and caught a few mischievous little wizards almost every day. Now the job of cleaning the toilet is almost scheduled for next year. That night, Filch, who was patrolling as usual, wandered in the library, and a slight sound from the forbidden book area in the distance attracted his attention. Filch quickly walked to the direction where the sound came from, holding a kerosene lamp and looking around, but there was no human figure except the air, let alone a human figure. Not even a mouse was seen. Filch, who was cursing, checked again and again before leaving in despair. In a corner where Filch had just been inspecting, a figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It was Anduin. It was a close call. I didn't expect that some banned books would have magic alarms. I almost got caught. Anduin thought with lingering fear. And why was he here? That's because he finally learned the disillusionment charm. In the second half of this school year, Anduin's physique finally met the conditions for using high-level spells, so he spent a lot of time practicing the shield charm and the disillusionment charm. Now he has basically upgraded these two spells to the mastery level. After mastering the shield charm, he can start to study and replicate Lily's amulet. With the disillusionment charm, wouldn't it be a waste not to use it for night walks? So during this period, Anduin would cast a spell on himself every night and then run to the forbidden book section of the library to check the banned books. But this is indeed the forbidden book area. Many of the books here are cursed or have magic alarms. If you flip through them casually, it will easily trigger the alarm. Anduin was almost discovered by mistake just now. Seeing Filch walking away, Anduin cast an illusion spell on himself again and continued to look for the books he wanted. However, he was more careful now. Before flipping through the books, he first used spell stop and detect curse to check the books, and then flipped through the books to check. Found it. After spending 2 hours, Anduin finally found the information he wanted. The rooms that can drive the flow of magic power and the energy storage rooms have been collected in the past few days. Unfortunately, these should be 3-dimensional rooms. The room image is recorded in the book of 2-dimensional. It is not easy to restore these rooms based on these flat images and the descriptions in the book. Anduin pondered. He recently began to study the research on temperature control spells in the spell club. In the club, Anduin learned that in order to affect the temperature, it is necessary to master the control and flow of heat, which requires the help of runes that drive the flow of magic power. He had another idea for runes driven by magic. He imagined that when studying runes that drive the flow of magic, he would try to develop a rune that can absorb external magic autonomously. At the same time, he was also looking for runes that can store magic. Magic equipment such as his monocles and face shoes directly absorb their own magic to drive when they are activated. Alchemical items that want to drive autonomously need runes with the function of storing magic, just like batteries, which can continuously drive magic items. Anduin learned from Professor Bones that there are currently many styles of magic storage runes, but the effects are relatively general. Most of them use the energy storage function of the alchemical materials themselves. Most of the alchemical items on the market are of this type. Therefore, the combination of runes that absorb magic and runes that store energy can extend the driving time of magic items in a different direction, which is equivalent to adding a solar panel to the battery, charging while continuing the battery life. After comparing several energy storage runes learned by Professor Bones, he felt unsatisfied, so he thought of going to the Forbidden Book area to look for relevant information on energy storage runes, and at the same time collect more research data on the direction of magic flow. This time the harvest is good, but unfortunately it is all paper materials, and it takes a lot of experiments and tests to restore the corresponding rune combination. If you have to choose between the two directions of drive and storage, you should start the research on magic drive runes first. On the one hand, you can accumulate data on magic absorption, and on the other hand, you can also study temperature control runes. Anduin made up his mind. In the second half of the semester, Anduin still maintained a very self-disciplined life and study, and basically did not communicate with the classmates around him. The Wizarding World launched a vigorous campaign to arrest Death Eaters. The entire law enforcement department was mobilized by Minister Millicent Barnold, and many of those pure blood families were also investigated. Anduin and Professor Bones also discussed this. Bones believed that these measures were not enough to defeat the pure blood families who supported the Dark Lord. Many Death Eaters from pure blood families defended themselves by saying that they were controlled by the Imperious Curse or that the perpetrators took Polyjuice Potion and were framed. Therefore, it is difficult to arrest a Death Eater and put him in jail unless he is caught on the spot. Is it useless to check the memory and use the truth serum? Anduin once asked the professor. But this is a magical world, so all kinds of things can be faked, including memories. Chapter 117 End of Term, asking for monthly ticket recommendation. All of this was within Anduin's expectations, so he had been planning to use other methods to cause trouble for them. However, although these so-called investigations had little effect on those pure blood families, they also made them less arrogant, which even affected the pure blood wizards in Slytherin College. No one has been following him for a while, which means that there is less material for practicing legilimency and oblivion. In the past period of time, Anduin's progress in these two magics was gratifying because he could practice with live bodies. But he didn't dare to blatantly capture some pure blood wizards to use. Professor Bones monitored Hogwarts regardless of who you are. Recently, Anduin also noticed that there would be a faint wave of magic passing by him occasionally. It seems that the professor is afraid that he will cause trouble and has included him in the surveillance target. In this case, let's solve it all at once in the next semester. Besides, these little wizards are just a small part, and those Death Eaters outside the school are the big part. In this way, Anduin's second year at Hogwarts came to an end. Professor Bones resigned 2 weeks before the final exam. Although the Dark Lord had disappeared, he did not want to challenge the power of the curse in the defense against the Dark Arts class. Anduin completed all the exams with excellent grades this year, while Vivian was still seriously biased in her subjects. Except for the history of magic, she only barely passed the other subjects. At the farewell dinner at the end of the semester, Headmaster Dumbledore announced the winner of the House Cup for this school year. The honest and reliable Hufflepuff House won the final crown. This year, Ravenclaw almost lost all Quidditch matches, which made them fall behind by a lot of points. Slytherin and Gryffindor were still playing badly throughout the whole process. This year, they were still fighting hard, and the points deducted were more than the points added. When choosing the third-year elective courses, he decided to choose Ancient Runes and Care of Magical Creatures after consideration. Among them, he was already very familiar with the Ancient Runes. Choosing this course basically guaranteed that he would receive an excellent evaluation for this course. After being in contact with Hagrid for a long time, he also had a deep understanding of the knowledge of magical animals. Mastering more knowledge of magical animals would also be very helpful for his alchemy. For safety reasons, he decided to stay in school this summer vacation with caution after obtaining the consent of Professor McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore. He planned to stay in the Forbidden Forest hut for the next 2 months. Hagrid was very happy about this, and he would have time to continue his research. I can't go back with you this year, Charles. Remember to keep training. Your current progress is still not ideal. I plan to increase the intensity next school year. Don't fall behind. Anduin made the final instructions to his 2 friends. Vivian smiled and nodded, while Charles smiled bigly. Anduin had tormented him badly this year. After sending his 2 friends on the train, Anduin turned around and walked towards Hogwarts. At this time, several vicious eyes stared at him. Damn it, that guy never leaves the school, what should we do? Wilkes, who was sitting in the carriage, said angrily. HMPH, it's all because of you. You always send people to monitor him. Anyone would know that they are being watched. Don't you understand that I told you to keep a low profile? You were just stirring up trouble. Rowley actually stroked the few whiskers growing on his chin and said, what if he keeps shrinking next school year? Travs also chimed in. Don't worry, Professor Bones is gone, Vanessa has graduated, and I have the final say in Slytherin next semester. I will find a way to force the guy to submit. Yaxley looked at everyone and showed a wicked smile. Hectares, what do you think we should do to deal with that mudblood? He dared to challenge the glory of the pure blood family. Wilkes also laughed viciously. I want to dig out his eyes. I feel sick when I see his eyes. Trav's expression was ferocious, and he must have thought of some bad memories. It doesn't matter what you do, but remember, you can't kill people, at least not in school, otherwise you'll be in big trouble. Yaxley reminded. I think those dirty mudbloods shouldn't be allowed to enroll. Dumbledore must be crazy. Travs muttered angrily. Rosier, who was also in the carriage at this time, swallowed nervously, listening to these guys talking nonsense, but he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. If they really got rid of Anduin, wouldn't he no longer be controlled by others? But thinking about it, it's not right. If Anduin revealed that Rosier had helped him, the consequences for him might be even worse. Have you received any news from your family? Where is the survivor of the Potter family? Does anyone know what the Dark Lord is like now? Yaxley suddenly changed the subject and asked about Voldemort's situation. I don't know, but my uncle said that he is very sure that the Dark Lord is not really dead, and he will return one day. Travs said. Yaxley glanced at Travs. He knew that the man in Travs's family was a fanatic of the Dark Lord, so it was not surprising that he had such an opinion. Then he glanced at Rosier and asked, what about your family? Rosier saw Yaxley asking him and stammered, I don't know. My father seems, not very sure that the Dark Lord can come back. After hearing Rosier's words, Yaxley pulled up the sleeve of his left hand angrily. Everyone saw a striking Dark Lord symbol printed on the inside of his left arm. A poisonous snake coiled out of the mouth of a black skull, still wriggling slightly on the skin. Seeing Yaxley's display, everyone in the car showed different expressions. Some were in awe, fear, envy, and even ecstasy. HMPH, the Dark Lord's symbol still exists. This is the best proof that the fire of our ideals will never go out. Betrayal often starts with people who are not strong enough. You should persuade your father. It is in our common interest to maintain the supremacy of pure blood. Yaxley saw Rosier's cowardly look and said sternly. Yes, I know. By the way, Yaxley, I heard that you will be elected as the president of the student union next year. I have a good suggestion for you. When Rosier heard Yaxley mention the word betrayal, his heart skipped a beat and cold sweat almost came out. But thinking of the threat from that man, he still put his head close to Yaxley's ear and whispered something. After hearing Rosier's suggestion, Yaxley's brows relaxed and he even looked at Rosier with a new eye. Travs on the side sighed to himself. Since the disappearance of the Dark Lord, the families have had a hard time. That woman Millicent has been keeping an eye on the families every day. The Lestrange family has also been arrested. I heard that they were planning to deal with Professor Bones this summer, but it's a pity that he escaped. Chapter 118 New school year. Professor Bones probably didn't expect that the information Anduin provided him would save his life. The glory of pure blood will not fade away. All the dirty bloodliness that dared to challenge the authority of pure blood wizards should be eliminated, as well as other dirty things that have tainted Slytherin. I just happened to have a good idea, and I can plan it well for the next school year. Yaxley raised his head and said proudly. Then he asked everyone to come together and told him about his arrangements in detail. On the other side, after Anduin returned to the Forbidden Forest Lodge, he still repeated his self-disciplined life, practicing spells, developing spells, studying alchemy, cooking with Hagrid, taking care of the vegetable garden, etc. every day. At the same time, he still maintained good correspondence with several friends. Charles was still training very hard under Anduin's remote supervision, and Vivian went abroad to play with her parents again. After Professor Bones resigned, he got a minor illness. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was probably the curse that was at work. Fortunately, he got through the period safely. At the same time, the professor still frequently corresponded with Anduin and exchanged academic issues. The two still had many unresolved issues in alchemy and spells. At the Longbottom family, Augusta was the only one who supported the whole family. She originally wanted to invite Anduin to spend a summer vacation there. After all, they had experienced a summer together. Augusta admired Anduin's independence and rigor very much. Unfortunately, Anduin considered safety issues and was afraid of dragging Augusta down, so he had to refuse the old woman and said that he would visit her as soon as he dealt with things here. The Weasley family also had frequent contact with Anduin. Molly had a good impression of Anduin. In addition, Anduin helped their family last year, so she often cared about Anduin's recent situation. Bill Weasley would also be enrolled in Hogwarts next year, and Molly also asked Anduin to take care of Bill. According to tradition, Bill should be sorted into Gryffindor after entering school. Charles will help take care of him then. Should Bill also be included in his training program? Anduin had a very evil idea in his mind. After nearly a year of training Charles, Anduin found that his training content could be replicated on others. This high-intensity training can significantly improve the various qualities of wizards. Unfortunately, the data source is very single, with only Charles. It seems that it is time to expand the training personnel. While the little wizard is growing up, this kind of basic training is most suitable. As time passed, Anduin and Hagrid's peaceful life gradually came to an end, and school was about to start. Near dusk that day, Hagrid packed his luggage and prepared to go to the station to greet the new students. At this time, a young man walked out of the hub next to him. Anduin was wearing a pair of dark leather boots, black trousers tucked into the boots, fastened by a belt with a silver belt buckle printed with Ouroboros, a dark waist bag hung on one side of the leather bag, with a few potions faintly visible on it, a black turtleneck shirt on the upper body, matched with the meticulous school color tie, and a silver and black waistcoat on the outside. In addition to the school emblem on the chest, there is also a silver Snape brooch, plus the school robes on the outside. The whole person looks simple, solemn, and at the same time shows a low-key luxury. At this time, Anduin's black hair has long been over his shoulders, but he still combed it back neatly, and under his two sword eyebrows, he has a bright copper monocle, which is connected to a thin chain extending from the small pocket on his right chest, and he has a silver smooth ring on his hand, from which a trace of lines can be seen faintly. Anduin, I'm going to pick up the new students. You go to the auditorium first. Hagrid said, holding his kerosene lamp. Yes. Anduin pinched his monocle and replied. Along the path, Anduin passed through the empty castle corridor and was the first to arrive at the auditorium. Candles were still floating in the sky, illuminating the hall. He came to the sliding long table, found a seat casually and sat down, then waited quietly. After a while, some professors entered the auditorium through the side door one after another. After seeing Anduin sitting down alone in advance, they nodded to him. After 2 years of contact, many professors admire this rigorous and pragmatic young man. Although they sometimes felt that he was a little introverted and rarely appeared, he was very good in both study and classroom discipline. Snape also saw Anduin after he walked into the hall. He saw Anduin nodding and greeting him, and then just raised his chin indifferently. In his eyes, Anduin was a proud, cold, powerful, but arrogant guy. He was respectful in words, but he didn't put anyone in his eyes. If he hadn't seen him save, he wouldn't have given this guy a good face. Severus, I really envy you. There is such an outstanding young man in the college. You don't know that Anduin submitted a research paper on a new spell some time ago. Although it hasn't been translated into a spell, the effect is very powerful. Professor Flitwick chatted with Snape. At the end of last semester, Anduin and Professor Bones finally sorted out the paper on the development and application of the Echo Charm. Flitwick knew that the two often tinkered with spells together, and he was also happy to see Anduin learn from a professional master like Bones. But when he actually saw Anduin's paper, he was still surprised, because this spell, except for the lack of spells, has a very mature structure. After testing it himself, he found that it has a wide range of applications, so he decided to submit Anduin to the Century of Spells. Although this new spell was developed by Anduin and Professor Bones, many people still think that the credit for the research mainly belongs to Bones. It is just a humble move of Professor Bones to let Anduin be the first signer, but it is also a remarkable achievement. Professor Bones and Professor Flitwick have recently received many letters from scholars from all over the world to study and discuss the Echo spell. Perhaps they think that Anduin, as a second-year student, is just playing a supporting role, so most scholars directly bypass Anduin to communicate with the two masters. However, since Bones and Flitwick introduced to the letter writers that Anduin was the main conceiver and developer of this new spell, he has also entered the vision of those masters and scholars in the academic circles of various places. It is believed that it will not be long before Anduin will be harassed by the letters from those scholars. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 119 Branch, You're Too Kind. Snape couldn't help showing a hint of satisfaction when he heard Professor Flitwick constantly praising the students of his own college. This made Anduin's favorability in Snape's heart slightly increase. Maybe this little bastard who attacked him was not completely useless. While Snape was thinking about it, Headmaster Dumbledore also appeared in the auditorium. He still had a kind look on his face. After greeting everyone, he sat down in the middle of the auditorium. Along with Dumbledore, there was also a strange adult wizard who looked to be in his 20s or less than 30 years old. He sat down in the teacher's seat with a sad face. Is that the Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts this year? Why does he look so constipated? Anduin secretly complained in his heart. Before Anduin could observe for long, the door of the auditorium was opened, and the little wizards from grades 2 to 7 walked into the hall one after another. Suddenly, the whole hall was full of people. Anduin. Vivian saw Anduin sitting at the long table early and walked over quickly. Long time no see, Vivian. How was your summer vacation? Anduin smiled when he saw Vivian. Not bad. Have you finished your summer homework? Lend it to me later to copy it. I was busy playing mahjong at home this summer. I only remembered about homework on the train back. As soon as Vivian sat down, she started to talk to Anduin anxiously. Anduin couldn't stand it and held his forehead. How could he be friends with such an unreliable girl? Just as he was taking out his homework from his pocket, the group of pure-blood wizards also walked into the auditorium. As soon as they came in, everyone glanced at Anduin intentionally or unintentionally, and the malice in their eyes could not be stopped. Vivian, who was sitting nearby, couldn't help but shrink her head when she saw them come in. She tilted her head and whispered to Anduin, "You don't know how arrogant these guys are this year. Last year they only bullied those students who were unwilling to stand by them. This year, they were arrogant as soon as they got on the train. They ran to every carriage with Slytherin students and warned them that they must obey Axley's orders this year. They also said that no one is allowed to talk to you or have contact with you, saying that too much contact with you will be contaminated." Anduin didn't care at all when he heard it, but he still cooperated and questioned, "Isn't the mysterious man gone? How dare they be so rampant?" This year Axley became the president of the student union, and Wilkes was also elected as the prefect. They acted as if the Dark Lord had never disappeared, and they are even more arrogant than before. Senior Higgs, who was kicked out of the Quidditch team by them last year, was slapped twice by Wilkes because he talked back. It was on the train. My God, it's lawless. Vivian told Anduin about the scene she saw when she came here with a beaming eyebrow. Yaxley and the others walked to the front of the long table, patted the shoulders of several young wizards who had already sat down, and pushed them aside or to the back of the long table, and then sat down together and chatted there. Anduin nodded with satisfaction. It seemed that Rosie had acted according to his instructions. Vivian frowned helplessly, and just as she was about to say something, she heard Anduin interrupt and said, "Since they told you so, you still dare to talk to me?" Humph. Vivian showed an arrogant look. "I'm not afraid of them. If you have the guts, come and provoke me. Our Mahjong club is not a vegetarian either." Seeing Vivian so confident, Anduin also smiled and nodded, and then stopped paying attention to those guys. Soon, Professor McGonagall led a group of young wizards wearing new wizard robes into the auditorium. Most of the young wizards showed uneasy wonders on their faces, obviously frightened by the so-called sorting test. From a distance, Anduin saw Bill in the crowd. With his fiery red hair, it was hard not to notice him. After a year, Bill had not changed much except that he had grown taller. Bill, who had been looking around, also noticed Anduin at the slying table. Seeing him look very familiar with a completely different outfit, Bill was not even sure if he was the Anduin brother he had seen last year. It was not until Anduin nodded to Bill that Bill smiled at him cheerfully. Just as the two looked at each other, Professor McGonagall on the podium called out the list of the sorting houses. "I'd Gumble." An ignorant little wizard walked out of the crowd and sat down on the chair next to her under the guidance of Professor McGonagall. Slytherin. The sorting hat quickly called out not long after it was on the boy's head. Bill Weasley. After a while, Bill's name was called again. Bill nervously straightened his clothes and sat down on the chair. Gryffindor. The sorting hat quickly called out the name of the house without any hesitation. As expected. Anduin smiled and muttered. The sorting ceremony continued, and students from each college welcomed the new students with applause and cheers. The first boy who was sorted sat opposite Anduin. It was no wonder. Due to the threats from Yaxley and others, no one dared to get too close to Anduin, so there was almost only Vivian around him, and there were empty seats everywhere. "Hello, Ibrahimovic Gamble." The shy boy who just sat down mustered up the courage to greet the elegant boy in front of him. "Hello, Ibrahimovic, you can call me Anduin." Anduin responded with a smile. "Hey, Ibrahimovic, I can call you that, I'm Vivian Bulstrode." Vivian also smiled and greeted the shy boy in front of her. Yes, you can call me Ibogamba. I know the last name Bulstrode. My grandmother's last name is Bulstrode. I seem to have found a relative and spoke more fluently. Hectares, then we are still relatives. But then again, it's not difficult to find a relative in Slytherin. Vivian half complained and half joked. Hehe, my father also said that holding a banquet in Slytherin is equivalent to a family dinner. Everyone can talk about the relationship. I've also laughed. Speaking of which, the last name Gamba sounds familiar. Let me think about it. Vivian scratched her head and thought for a while. I remember, did your family have a minister of magic? I remember that it was Otlan Gamba. He served as a minister in the last century and had a pretty good reputation. Chapter 120. Purity Committee. Yeah. Ibrahimovic blushed, then nodded with a little pride. Anduin glanced at the two in surprise. He knew that Vivian was good at magical history, but he didn't expect that she even knew the name. He didn't know that the shy boy in front of him was actually from a famous family. Minister Otlan Gamble set up a committee to investigate the intelligence of Muggles during his term, and confirmed that the intelligence of Muggles seemed to be much greater than what wizards believed. He was also a minister who was closer to Muggles and was very popular during his term. Vivian told Anduin about the history she knew. Ibrahimovic, who was sitting opposite, blushed in embarrassment when he heard Vivian boasting about his ancestors. Yes. Ibrahimovic said with a smile, since that ancestor, our family has been committed to studying Muggles. Among them, there are 2 professors of Muggle studies. My grandmother is also a Muggle. Now we also live in a Muggle community. I went to their kindergarten when I was a child. Ibrahimovic was not so nervous at this time. He also talked about his childhood life to the 2. It can be heard that he made many Muggle friends when he was young. Your thoughts are very dangerous. The 3 were chatting, but a discordant voice interrupted them. Several people turned their heads and found that it was Wilkes who walked to their side. Wilkes glanced at Anduin and continued to say to Ibrahimovic, people born of Muggles are just low-level creatures. As a Slytherin, you must know where you belong and don't always hang out with some dubious guys. After saying that, he looked at Anduin intentionally or unintentionally. At this time, Evie looked at Wilkes helplessly, then looked at Anduin, and whispered, but, many of my Muggle friends are very smart, no different from us. Humph. Wilkes, you have nothing to do here. What do you want to do here? Are you disturbing our dinner? Vivian slammed the table and glared at Wilkes. Hehe, as a class leader, is there anything wrong with me caring about the freshmen of the college? Isn't it just worrying that young people who are not well versed in the world will be led astray by others? Wilkes sneered. Vivian was so angry that she wanted to stand up and argue with him, but Anduin quickly grabbed her shoulders and pushed her back to her seat. It seems that someone has forgotten the pain after the scar healed. It doesn't matter. Just say whatever you want to say, and I will write it down one by one. Anduin smiled slightly, and actually took out a notebook seriously, opened it, and stared at Wilkes. Wilkes was frightened by Anduin's stare, and recalled some bad memories from last semester. He could only snort and turn away. Humph, coward. He ran away with his tail between his legs when you threatened him. He must be afraid that you would write down his words and deeds and report them to the dean, and then remove his position as the prefect. Vivian said sarcastically angrily. Knowing what was going on, Anduin didn't say much, but looked at Evie apologetically. Sorry, I let you see these as soon as you entered the academy. No, nothing. Is that our academy's prefect? He looked so fierce. Being frightened by Wilkes, Evie stuttered nervously again. Don't pay attention to that guy, he's not a good guy, what else can he do except bully people? Vivian complained angrily. Seeing that Vivian also looked fierce, Evie could only nod nervously. The sorting ceremony ended soon, and the grand admission dinner officially began. Facing the sumptuous dinner in front of them, all the little wizards enjoyed it happily. After the dinner, the little wizards returned to their respective common rooms in an orderly manner after singing the annoying school song under the command of Dumbledore. When they returned to the common room, Rowley Axley, who was already the president of the student union, called everyone and began his speech. Hello everyone, I'm the Slytherin Boy Prefect and the president of the Boy Student Union. On behalf of Slytherin House, I welcome all the new students. Yaxley smiled at all the new students and took the lead applauding to welcome them. Up to this point, his words were nothing special, but soon his tone suddenly changed. I think everyone knows what Slytherin is. We are born noble, smart, ambitious, and determined. We value rights and honor. You should be proud to be assigned to our school. Yaxley looked around and continued, at the same time, we are also the representatives of bloodliner and purity. It is our natural duty to maintain the purity of bloodliner. The wizarding world is now in a mess. All kinds of dirty things that come out of nowhere have the nerve to run out and claim to be wizards. They want to challenge our status and reputation, take away our jobs, and even want to rule and manage the wizarding world. This is simply a great shame. Many pure-blood wizards in the audience heard their boss's declaration and applauded and joined in. The students who were not firm in their positions were also inspired to applaud. Not to mention the young wizards who had just entered school. They didn't understand why, but they were also influenced by the crowd to applaud. Seeing that the effect was good, Yaxley stretched out his hand and pressed lightly, and everyone obeyed the command and quieted down. So in Slytherin, we have to take the lead in safeguarding the interests of pure blood and eliminate all muggle-related connections. Quick Wilkes, Miliosmt, Sample Travs, you guys come up. At Yaxley's call, Wilkes, Travs and a 6th grade female prefect Osmt walked up the stairs together. Next, we will establish a purity committee in Slytherin to specifically handle muggle affairs within the academy. The 3 of them and I will be the leaders of this committee, and everyone must comply. Yaxley spread his hands to the 3 people standing beside him, motioning them to come forward and speak. Travs spoke first. Remember our 3 faces. When we come, it means the committee is here to inspect. Except for us, no one can control you. Do you understand? Travs shouted arrogantly to the people below the stairs. Understood. The other pure-blood wizards in the audience took the lead in responding, and the other young wizards had to follow suit. Let me introduce you. This is the president of our college's purity committee, Senior Wilkes. Call me Senior. Travs pointed at Travs next to him and introduced him to everyone. Hello, Senior. Wilkes raised his head and stood forward amid a bunch of scattered shouts. Chapter 121 Conflict. In the future, we will conduct regular inspections of the dormitories in Slytherin. Students from all colleges are not allowed to privately keep muggle items. Once discovered, they will be confiscated. If they resist, they will be punished. In addition, we will identify the bloodliness of the students in this college. Pure blood students will enjoy certain privileges, while the rest of the mixed blood students will be distinguished according to the degree of your mixed blood. The status of those with a low degree of mixed blood is similar to that of pure blood students, and those with a high degree of mixed blood may simply be muggle students. Wilkes couldn't help but glance at Anduin and Vivian, and then continued. They must obey all orders from the noble pure blood students, and be responsible for all sanitation and cleaning work in the college. Anyone who does not obey orders will be regarded as contempt for Slytherin and will be severely punished. At this point, Wilkes looked around again and shouted. Pure blood supremacy. Pure blood supremacy. Pure blood supremacy. Pure blood supremacy. The pure blood wizards under the stairs raised their right hands excitedly and cheered. The freshmen, the rest of the pure blood students, and those who only had a little bit of mixed blood, were also swept up and raised their right hands and shouted in a low voice. After hearing Wilkes's declaration, the remaining small number of mixed blood wizards looked at each other with pale faces, but they were outnumbered and could only endure the cheers around them. After Anduin heard what the few people said, there was no expression on his face, as if he had known all this for a long time. But Vivian beside him was furious. As a half-squib and muggle, she suddenly became an inferior person, and all muggle items were banned. The mahjong in her mahjong club was a muggle item. In order to strengthen the mahjong club, she specially purchased a few more mahjong sets this year, but now they are all gone. You can't do this. This is simply a crime. I will report to Dean Snape and protest. As everyone was cheering, a figure jumped up the stairs and scolded. Wilkes saw someone opposing him, he squinted at the newcomer, sneered and said, "Who am I talking about, Willen Higgs? You were a pure blood, but your heart always sides with those dirty muggles. You want to report? Let me tell you, my status as prefect is approved by Professor Snape, and betraying us is betraying Slytherin. You will be despised by the whole Slytherin. Come on, you are not qualified to represent Slytherin, you are simply the remnants of the you-know-who are." Before Higgs could finish his words, Yaxley stepped forward and kicked him down the stairs, and the pure blood little wizards in the front row took advantage of the situation and stepped on him a few times, causing Higgs to scream in pain. After Yaxley kicked Higgs off the stage, he sneered condescendingly. "HMPH, don't question us casually, you have no right to shout at us. I warn you, Slytherin's affairs can only be resolved in Slytherin. If you dare to betray us, you'll suffer." Seeing this, Vivian was furious. She and Anduin rushed forward to push away the crowd and rescued Higgs from the crowd. Yaxley did not stop them. He just smiled contemptuously and denounced the disbandment, ignoring Anduin and others. At Yaxley's signal, the crowd quickly left the place. Some people still watched Higgs joke, and some half-blood wizards returned to their dormitories panting. "Senior Higgs, how are you? Are you okay?" Vivian patted the dust off Higgs and asked hurriedly. Ahem, it's okay, these guys are too abominable. I didn't expect that senior sister Vanessa wanted to completely control Slytherin as soon as she graduated. No, I have to go to Dean Snape. If Dean Snape doesn't care, I will go to the headmaster." Higgs shouted after a few violent coughs. "Go to the headmaster? I can't agree to this. I finally found a good opportunity. I can't let you ruin the plan." Anduin thought about it and decided to fool this senior first. "It's useless, senior." Anduin shook his head at Higgs. Hogwarts has always been adhering to the concept of self-management of the college. If it is not a special situation, the principal will not directly intervene in the affairs of the college. Those guys will definitely control the scale so that the situation will not be serious enough to alarm the principal. As for the dean, how could Wilkes become a prefect without his approval? If you report it, you will be the only one who will be in trouble. They are just short of someone to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys. You will only suffer in vain if you go up to them at this time. What should we do? We can't let them destroy Slytherin like this. If this kind of atmosphere is brought up, the situation of those half-blood wizards, I dare not imagine it. Anduin, you're a muggle-born, and they will definitely point the finger at you." Higgs struggled to stand up, but still said indignantly, "Of course we have to fight, but we can't just rely on the professors to help us solve it. This kind of thing can only be done by ourselves." Anduin smiled and whispered in Higgs' ear, "You are still in the mood to laugh. It's already this late. And what do you mean? Could it be that? What did you mean by support you before?" Vivian was a person who could not hide her thoughts, and could not help asking. "Yes." Anduin nodded. "The war has begun, us, and them." Persuasion alone was useless. Anduin thought that he should find a reason to keep them from interfering in Yaxley's tyranny. Higgs was shocked when he heard Anduin's words, and then pulled Anduin and Vivian to a corner where no one was, staring at Anduin. "What war? Are you going to fight those guys? They are numerous and powerful, and many of them are senior students. I'm not sure I can defeat them. Don't be afraid. This is not the first time I have fought with them. I have been prepared for all this. I just didn't expect them to dare to do so much. Now, all you need to consider is whether you want to fight me." Anduin sneered, then looked at the two and asked, "I've been displeased with them for a long time. They even want to confiscate my mahjong and destroy my mahjong club. Of course I support you." Vivian's face turned red, partly because of anger and partly because of excitement. Higgs on the side was a little hesitant. Looking at the two people in front of him, he felt that their ideas were crazy, just like an ant trying to push an elephant. It seems that you are still hesitant, senior. It doesn't matter. As long as you keep it a secret for us, it doesn't matter if you don't join. Seeing that Higgs didn't express his opinion, Anduin said very openly. Chapter 122 Duel. Are you sure? Higgs thought he was crazy. He even wanted to believe the young man in front of him. Of course I am. I'm not good at other things, but fighting. Anduin showed a charming smile. I don't take those guys seriously. In that case. Higgs looked up and stared at Anduin. Prove it to me, otherwise I can only stop you, because your recklessness is likely to put both you and Vivian in danger. Higgs looked at the junior in front of him seriously, trying to find a trace of fear or hesitation in his eyes, but the facts disappointed him. As you wish, tomorrow afternoon, you come to Hagrid's cabin, just beside the Forbidden Forest. Do you know that place? Yes, it's the residence of the keeper. Higgs nodded. Vivian, you too. Anduin looked at Vivian. Okay, I understand. Vivian knew that. Anduin had been living there for a while, and she would occasionally go to play with him. Then let's do it this way for now. We'll talk tomorrow if there's anything. After saying that, Anduin parted with the two and returned to his dormitory. The next day, after finishing the full-day classes, Higgs followed Vivian to Hagrid's hut. When they arrived near the hut, they found that someone had arrived in advance, that is, Charles. Now he has basically formed a habit. After the class in the afternoon, he will run all the way here, and he will warm up on the way. Charles, who had just arrived, was stretching and preparing to start today's training plan. Seeing Vivian coming with a Slytherin senior, he was a little surprised, but he also guessed that they were looking for Anduin. Anduin, someone is looking for you. Charles greeted Vivian and shouted to the hut behind him. Anduin came earlier than him. If he came here at a trot, then Anduin could be said to be running here. It was the same in the past. As soon as he arrived, he ran to his room to tinker with things. The door of the hut was pushed open. Seeing Higgs arrived on time, Anduin nodded to him. Come on, Anduin, just like you said yesterday, if you want me to believe you, you must first prove to me that you have the power to defeat them, otherwise I will not sit back and watch you seek your own death. Higgs got straight to the point when they met. Okay, let's fight with magic spells, how about stopping at a certain point? Seeing Higgs so direct, Anduin actually had a lot of good feelings for this senior. As you wish. Higgs nodded and went to the open space on the side, drew out his wand and prepared for battle. In that case, let Charles try it. Anduin looked at Charles who was watching the show on the side, and then nodded at Higgs. Me? Him? Charles and Higgs looked at Anduin in surprise. Charles didn't know what was going on, and then he was called by Anduin, and he scratched his head in confusion. Anduin, are you sure you're not kidding? I've been promoted to the 5th grade with all my grades. Do you expect a Gryffindor Junior to fight me? Seeing this arrangement, Higgs suddenly felt that Anduin was very unreliable, as he had actually thought of trusting this guy before. Charles has been trained by me for a year before, and now it's a good time to test his level. Anduin looked at Charles. How is it? Is it okay? Can I really do it? Charles had always been beaten by Anduin in previous training, and now he still doubted his own strength. Just go ahead if I tell you to, don't be long-winded, remember, you can only use the disarming spell. Anduin instructed Charles. What, you can only use the disarming spell? Are you kidding? Then how can I defend myself? Apart from anything else, I should be able to use the protective spell. Charles complained. No, you can't cast the armor spell at all, and you are not familiar with the barrier spell. It's useless to use it. As for defense, I will teach you the steps, or use the magic wand to directly deflect the spell. Didn't you practice before? Anduin frowned and scolded. But Charles did have relevant training, but his opponent was Anduin. The success rate of dodging with body movements and deflecting spells with the magic wand has always been low. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but frown. No buts, hurry up. Anduin urged. Come on, Charles, I believe in you. Vivian beside him also cheered him up. Higgs on the side was getting impatient, and felt that Anduin was becoming more and more unreliable. He could not help but urge him, have you decided? If not, you two can come together. Don't waste my time. Hearing this, Charles had to bite the bullet and step forward. He stood 10 meters away from Higgs. After taking a deep breath, he said firmly, I'm ready. Higgs nodded, and after a slight bow at Charles, he took a duel stance. Charles on the other side did not take a traditional duel stance. Instead, he was like fencing in the Muggle world, with one foot in front and the other in the back, and then he kept jumping slightly to adjust his position. His right hand holding the wand was also horizontal in front of him, staring at Higgs fiercely. Die. Expelliarmus. Higgs took the lead in launching the attack. He was worthy at being a top student in Slytherin. He quickly fired 2 spells, with almost no interval. The 2 spells were shot at Charles one after the other at a very fast speed. Charles also reacted quickly. When he saw the spell was formed, he quickly determined the trajectory of the spell based on his previous training experience. He dodged the spell with a flexible little jump, and then shot several disarming spells at a very fast speed. Higgs saw that Charles in front of him reacted so quickly, and he also put away his slightly contemptuous eyes, set up the armor spell to block Charles' attack, and then the two began to shoot spells passionately. But soon Higgs realized that something was wrong. The little wizard in front of him was very flexible. The opponent could easily dodge his spells with his steps. If he couldn't resist, he would use his wand to lightly pick it up. The spells shot by the opponent were fast and urgent, and it was actually a bit difficult for him to resist. Moreover, the opponent was still thinking about closing the distance in the fierce exchange of fire. Charles in front of him was only 7 or 8 meters away from him. Unknowingly, he had become the defensive party. But in Charles' eyes, the battle was indeed a different story. He was originally very nervous, but after 2 rounds of fighting, he found that the attack of the senior in front of him was very rigid. When he practiced with Anduin before, the attack angles of the spells were very tricky. Sometimes the spells would turn in the air, and the shooting speed and intensity of the spells were also exaggerated. Chapter 123 Victory or Defeat. But Higgs was different. The spells he fired were all in a straight line, and the trajectory was basically directed at his current position. There would be no attacks that blocked his position in advance, so he dodged very easily, and even had the opportunity to get close to the opponent in advance. Moreover, the spell firing speed was only average, and the trajectory could quickly predict the landing point as soon as it was 1 meter away. After picking up a few spells, he found that the strength was just so-so. So after a few rounds of fighting, Charles suddenly became more confident, constantly using flexible movement to dodge attacks, and then launched a rapid attack, forcing Higgs to get flustered. Higgs, who was originally standing in place and responding like a turret, was under great pressure at this time. Seeing that Charles was getting closer and closer and the shooting frequency was getting higher and higher, he couldn't help but gradually retreat a few steps. Opportunity. Charles saw that Higgs finally moved, and was retreating straight back, and he couldn't help but be overjoyed. This was simply the simplest uniform moving target. This kind of moving target training, Anduin had not given him the opportunity to practice half a year ago. Soon, Charles, who noticed Higgs's weakness, took advantage of the gap when the opponent was moving and fired 3 spells in succession. Then he rolled to the side, dodging several spells, and stood up to cast 2 disarming spells, attacking the direction of a body behind Higgs. At this time, Higgs saw 3 spells coming and quickly used the armor spell to block them, but just after blocking the 3 disarming spells, 2 more spells appeared from the side. At this time, he had no time to use the armor spell, so he had to concentrate his magic power like Charles and use his wand to pick up 1 spell, but the other disarming spell hit Higgs solidly, and the strong force pushed him back a few steps, and he sat on the ground, and the wand in his hand flew high and fell into Charles' hands. Charles let out a long sigh, then looked at the seized wand in his hand and cheered to Anduin happily. I won. I won. Vivian next to him was also excited and screaming, Charles, you're awesome, what a wonderful duel. Okay, why are you so excited? Anduin frowned and walked forward with a sports timer in his hand. Your steps are obviously slower than the end of last semester, and your reaction time after casting the spell is too long. Do you have to watch whether the spell hits the enemy or not? Don't you know to act in advance? And the pre-casting time is too long. Many times you can cast 4 spells in the time it takes to cast 3 spells. Tell me honestly, were you lazy during the summer vacation? You must not have practiced according to the calendar I gave you. You still have the nerve to write to me to complain. Charles didn't expect that he had obviously won the duel, but he was scolded by Anduin. He scratched his head nervously. Vivian, who was cheering for Charles on the side, also quieted down, but her face was still flushed with joy. Higgs, who was standing next to him, looked at his disarmed right hand, feeling mixed emotions. Charles saw this and quickly got rid of Anduin, walked up to pull Higgs up from the ground, and returned the disarmed wand to Higgs. Higgs looked at the lost wand and couldn't help asking Charles, "You are very strong, I admit defeat, but I still want to know, is Anduin as strong as you?" "Am I very strong?" Hearing Higgs' praise, Charles felt embarrassed, but Anduin always criticizes me for being weak, and I am not as strong as Anduin. If it was him who just fought me, I would have been beaten by him. Higgs couldn't help but take a breath of cold air when he heard this. Is Anduin, who is in the same college as him, so strong? You know, he is also a leader among students of the same age. He is not afraid even if he faces wilds. Unexpectedly, he was easily defeated by a junior student taught by Anduin today. After thinking about it, Higgs looked at Anduin and said firmly, "If you can have such strength, then I am willing to support you. Tell me, what are you going to do?" Charles on the side heard Higgs' words and didn't react to what they meant, and couldn't help looking at Vivian next to him. Vivian told Charles everything that had happened in the past 2 days. After listening to Vivian's introduction, Charles' face turned red with anger, and he quickly said to Anduin, "Those guys are really too much. They are simply going to form a new Death Eater organization in Hogwarts. Anduin, I support you too. Let's deal with those arrogant guys." After hearing the statements of several people, Anduin just smiled and said, "Don't be so excited, they are just a bunch of jumping clowns." Then he looked at Higgs. "What you have to do is very simple, senior. I don't plan to let you fight them head on. You just need to clean up the mess after I defeat those guys." "What?" Higgs was incredible after hearing Anduin's words. "What do you mean, you were going to deal with them alone? Are you crazy?" "Don't worry," Anduin said calmly. "I have been preparing. I am still very confident that I can deal with them. It's just that now those pure bloods have provoked opposition in Slytherin, so someone will be needed to stabilize the college at the time. This." Higgs frowned and thought for a while, thinking back to the previous battle. Maybe he could really fight against those guys, so he said firmly, "Okay, then what do I need to do?" "At present, there is no need to do anything, just wait now," Anduin said calmly. "Wait, you mean?" Higgs seemed to have thought of something. "The creed of Slytherin is to protect oneself. If there is no oppression, some people will just stand by and watch. Those guys messing around in Slytherin will definitely cause conflicts. As far as I know, there are not a few half-blood wizards in our academy." Anduin smiled coldly. "Yes, only 1/3 of Slytherin wizards are real pure-blood wizards, and that's just what they claim to be. The rest of the wizards are more or less half-blood, but although they are half-blood, they are basically members of well-known families in the wizarding world, just like Vivian. Although she is half-blood, she is also one of the legitimate heirs of the Bulstrode family." Higgs nodded. "Then let them make trouble. When those half-blood wizards can't stand it anymore, you will be needed to come out and seek justice for them. It is your job to win them over. Leave the radical pure-blood faction to me," Anduin said. Chapter 124 Professor Gemty. "But, are you really sure? There are 7 pure-blood wizards in the 6th and 7th grades, led by Axley. They are all quite strong, unlike those young wizards in the lower grades," Higgs reminded worriedly. "I have collected as much information about my own academy as you have. I have prepared to deal with them. Next, you and Vivian should keep a low profile. They still dare not do anything too excessive in school," Anduin reminded. "Also, if possible, I hope you can also join my training plan. After all, sufficient strength is the real capital." "What do you think?" Anduin asked. "Your training plan? Is it the same as Charles?" Vivian asked curiously. Yes, you don't know, after today's battle, I know how effective this kind of training is. You know, I have only experienced it for a year." Charles kept recommending his training plan to the two of them, thinking secretly in his heart, "I can't let you run away. This kind of suffering can't be borne by him alone." When the two heard this, they thought of the strength that Charles had just shown, so they readily agreed, and Charles came over. "Let me take care of the training, I want to help too." "Okay, then you will be the instructor of the basic training, and it will officially start tomorrow." Anduin nodded and agreed to Charles' request. After sending a few people away, Anduin returned to the house with a sigh of relief. He finally managed to stabilize these guys. He couldn't let them mess around. How could he not let these pure bloods make trouble? It would be better if they made a bigger and bigger noise, so that he would have the opportunity to seek the greatest benefit. I don't know what Dumbledore is planning. It seems that he deliberately indulges these pure bloods, but this is exactly what Anduin wants. And the following campus life seemed to be unaffected. It was so peaceful that it made people uneasy, and Anduin also washed in the first defense against the dark arts class of this semester. In the classroom, Anduin, Vivian and others saw the young professor with a sad face at the opening banquet. Now they couldn't see any joy on the professor's face. Hello everyone, I'm your defense against the dark arts professor this year, Guile Gemty. Although it is another boring day, I still have to meet you for a living. Anyway, let's start the class quickly. Professor Genty said a very negative opening speech with a blank expression, and found that the little wizards in the audience were all looking at him in shock. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Professor Genty asked, puzzled. Professor, you don't look like you're in a good mood. Do you want to ask Professor Snape for a bottle of joy potion? That may help you. A female student in the audience kindly suggested. Really? Although I know it's useless, I still have to say thank you. After all, this is the human relationship in the world. Professor Genty still said numbly. The girl who spoke could only laugh awkwardly after hearing what the professor said. Professor, do you want me to cast a spell for you? I know a spell that can make people laugh happily, said another student. You mean the happy spell, right? Unfortunately, I have to tell you that learning that kind of spell is just a waste of time. A person's emotions will not be affected by that kind of thing. When you don't have happiness in your heart, forcing someone to laugh is a more terrible torture. Professor Randy said expressionlessly. As soon as he finished speaking, the classroom was instantly silent. Seeing that everyone was so silent, Professor Randy forced himself to show a hideous smile and said, how about this, let me teach you a more powerful magic. Okay. Really? What magic? When the young wizards heard this, they immediately became interested again and were curious about what kind of magic the professor would teach. Professor Randy laughed and said, that is the magic that will prevent you from becoming like the professor in 20 years. By the way, your attitude of not actually having any interest but trying your best to cater to others will definitely be useful when you are looking for a job in the future. You must cherish it. The air in the classroom became quiet again. Anduin, our new teacher this year seems to be a little bit wrong. Vivian whispered quietly. Anduin nodded. This was not only wrong, but the professor's negative aura was almost spreading to them. The next 2 hours were very long for all the young wizards. Professor Randy kept telling everyone the contents of the textbook in his weak voice, and occasionally said some despairing and discouraging words. Okay, today's class ends here. It's finally time to go home. After all, every minute that passes brings us closer to death. Everyone can face it so calmly. I really admire you. Go back and write a 2-foot-long paper. Although I can't read it and don't know what's the point of assigning such a life-wasting homework, since all professors do this, in order to integrate myself into the group, I'll follow that crowd. After all, it's human nature to sacrifice oneself for survival, isn't it? Professor Randy finished the conversation weakly, and then announced the end of Get Out of Class. After walking out of the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Vivian couldn't help but shudder. After these 2 hours of class, she was almost depressed. After the professor's class, all the young wizards became listless and surrounded by negative energy. Even Anduin felt quite depressed. In the evening, Anduin finally adjusted his mood a little, packed his luggage, and prepared to attend this year's spell club. When he arrived at the gathering place, many seniors were already waiting there, and many of them were talking about this year's new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Have you taken the Defense Against the Dark Arts class this year? The new teacher is so scary. Taking his class is like being cast a spell that makes people depressed. It makes me have nightmares at night. A 7th grade senior said. Chapter 125 Spell Demonstration. That's right. I heard that the professor used to be a curse breaker at Gringotts. He had very strong counter-curse and curse-breaking skills, but I don't know when he became like that. Another male senior agreed. I've heard of him. There were many papers on counter-curses in many journals, but it seems that since 4 years ago, he has become particularly unlucky. No matter what spell he tries, it will fail. When he tries to break a curse, there'll always be accidents. Since then, he has stopped being a curse breaker. Shirley Lenst, who joined the club in the same year as Anduin and is now in the 7th grade, also interrupted. Shirley has always been particularly obsessed with counter-curses, which is also her main research direction. Do you think he was cursed when he was in Egypt? His situation is too abnormal. Another senior heard Shirley's words and interrupted. Who knows, maybe there is such a possibility. Otherwise, how could a good person become like this? Senior Sister Shirley also had similar doubts. Just as everyone was discussing, Professor Flitwick came in, and brought 2 young wizards with him, who looked like new members. Seeing the professor come in, the people who had gathered dispersed and returned to their seats to listen to the professor presiding over the meeting. Anduin couldn't help but have some guesses in his mind after hearing everyone's discussion. Professor Genti's condition must be abnormal, but there was too little information now, and he had no clue. Looking at the empty chair next to him, this has always been the seat of Senior Sister Vanessa. This Senior Sister, who was also a Slytherin, had helped him a lot. Now this former Senior Sister has graduated, and he doesn't know how she is doing now. I heard that the Senior Sister joined the Ministry of Magic and now seems to be interning in the Aurora office. Just as he was thinking about it, Professor Flitwick spoke. Everyone, it's a pleasure to see you again in the new school year. Likewise, let me first introduce the new members who joined the Charms Club this year. After saying that, Professor Flitwick looked at the 2 young wizards standing beside him and said, the first one is Marion Macmillan, a 5th-year student from Hufflepuff College. Welcome everyone. The audience gave a warm applause, and then the professor introduced another female student. This is Oleana Hinckley, a 3rd-year student from Ravenslaw. Welcome everyone. Anduin saw that this was an acquaintance. He remembered that when he first enrolled, this girl took the same boat to Hogwarts with him. He seemed to have seen her once later, but he forgot when it was. Let's arrange seats for you to sit down first. Marion, sit there. Oleana, sit there. It's the seat next to Anduin. After Professor Flitwick introduced the new members, he began to arrange seats for the 2. As Oriana walked down from the podium towards her seat, she happened to see Anduin next to her seat. She couldn't help but frown. She remembered this guy very clearly. 2 years ago, she was playing with him, but he threw a snowball and knocked her over. He was a completely rude guy. She didn't expect that he was also in this club. But Oriana thought about it and it didn't make sense. She was selected by the professor to join in her 3rd year. Wasn't this guy in the same year as her? How could he join the club earlier than her? Puzzled, Oriana frowned and sat next to Anduin. Anduin didn't pay any attention to her except for a glance at her when she walked over. He was indeed a rude guy. Oriana couldn't help but feel resentful. Okay, after introducing the new members, let's start announcing the research topics for this school year. The rest of the topics are the same as in previous years, but this year a new topic has been added. I hope everyone will keep up the good work. Professor Flitwick pointed his wand at the whiteboard beside him as usual, and various topic names began to appear on it. The development of elemental magic. This new topic seems to be quite innovative. Anduin looked at the new topic and immediately wrote it down. Seeing this, Oriana on the side also took out a notebook to record it, and Professor Flitwick on the stage spoke again. Have you finished recording the new topics? The topic selection time ends here. Next, let us congratulate Anduin Wilson. His paper development and application of the Echo spell has been published in many journals including Century of Spells. I believe that everyone who has subscribed to Century of Spells should have read it. As far as I know, many famous scholars and spellmasters have shown great interest in this new spell. Be careful Anduin, those old guys will soon overwhelm you with owls. Professor Flitwick made a little joke, and the people sitting there also looked at Anduin with a smile. Since he joined the Spells Club, he has always been a hard-working and low-key image. Unexpectedly, in just 2 years, Anduin has made such a big breakthrough in the field of spell development. Seeing this, Anduin stood up and bowed, then said modestly, the development of new spells mainly relies on the knowledge learned from the seniors in the club. For example, the amplification spell developed by Senior Quirrell gave me a lot of inspiration, and Professor Flitwick and Professor Bones gave me guidance and support. Otherwise, I alone could not complete the development of an independent spell so quickly. Seeing Anduin so modest, the seniors and juniors around him also smiled gently at him, and Quirrell, who was mentioned, took the lead in applauding. Oleana on the side saw that Anduin had achieved such a great achievement, and suddenly felt a little incredible. Is this really the young man who enrolled with her? Developing new spells? Are you kidding? Professor Flitwick on the stage also smiled and nodded. He has always been optimistic about Anduin. The hard work and rigor of this young man also gave him a lot of encouragement. Originally, he thought that Anduin would start with the topic of magic sensitivity, but he didn't expect that he would first achieve results in sonic magic. Alright. Flitwick pressed his hands together, and everyone stopped applauding. Anduin, let us see the new echo charm you developed. After all, everyone has only read the paper in the journal, and I'm sure you are still very curious about the specific effects of the spell. Anduin nodded. Professor Flitwick had informed him in advance that he needed to demonstrate the spell, and then he stood up and walked to the front desk to introduce it to everyone. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.